of them as well. What a move to the 48. Oh, look at this, and onto the straight they come.
Brilliant move there from the number 40 to make it through. That left-hander sliding up the inside, going up now over Hawthorne Hill, down Pilgrim's Drop, and it's brilliant stuff here at Brands Hatch.
Well, it is time for the final round of the 2024 Abruzzi Prototype Challenge here on RaceSpotTV and, of course, on Motorsport UK. I am Connery Maddock. I'm joined by Dara Thacker in the commentary booth for this finale at Silverstone. And it's not just a normal race at Silverstone either. It's the 300 kilometers finale here for the Abruzzi Prototype Challenge. 51 laps these drivers will have to contend with. We may even get some changeable conditions as well. It's a little bit unpredictable at the moment, but we'll keep track of that as we head through. But there's the schedule. We've been to Spa-Francorchamps, we've been to Daytona, Road America, and Suzuka, but it all comes down to this one, round number 5 at Silverstone. Dara, as we're going to have a look at our championships here, this is what the LMDh Pro standings look like. Really, it's a 2-horse race at the front there with Ben Ford and Daniel Thomas.
Yeah, they're the only two that can win the title tonight. William Ford a little bit too far back. Ben Ford 87, Daniel Thomas 74. You'd say that Ben Ford probably has a little bit of an advantage in his back pocket tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Holding the points advantage coming into today is not too shabby of a thing. Of course, we got a couple of others further down the order. William Foyle, Adam Locke, Salvatore Guianteo. We got Christian Saruta, Sarah Dove. Then Jordan Studwick, David Vey, Matthew Luke will be at the bottom of the pile there. Then you got the LMDh AM standing. So Philip Carnell leads that, and this is so close in and amongst 4 drivers at the very front. Patrick Den, Oliver Ettridge, Lucan Monroe, all within a shout at the championship. All of them within 5 points. Then you got Rocco Valentino down in 5th place with Charles Wimbley in 6th. Technically, Wimbley can still win the championship. Fun fact. Then you've also got Jamie Gibson, Nick Dealey, Robin Katzelberger, and Daniel Rees. And then in the LMP3 Pro order, it looks like this. Ant Castles and Andrew Medell, they've been close all season, and they're going to probably remain close here in the final race of the season as well. Championship undecided between those two. Then you've got James King, George Streetley, Gareth Higgins, and Patrick Ra. In the LMP3 AM standings, it's Ethan Barford that leads into this final round, but closely followed by both Aidan Carter and Franciszek Sikorsky. Further back is Joe Coffin with Baz Meacham, Cav Budd, Liam Kelson, Cal Newton, Craig Curtis, and Mark Baker. So that's the top to bottom of all 4 of your championships here today. All 4 championships that are up for grabs. So that just sets the stage for this finale. This is going to be absolutely crazy. I'm having a look at the weather forecast as well to see what is going to go on coming into the race. And oh boy, I don't think the iRacing system knows what to do with it at the moment, because the numbers are all over the place. But potentially we might have a bit of weather later on in the race.
Yeah, I think the numbers are going to be all over the place in the championship as we work our way through the race as well. I mean, it's going to be quite a packed evening of racing. As you mentioned, that LMDh AM category, 6 drivers in a mathematical contention to win the title, and 4 drivers split by only 5 points. I mean, it looks like it's going to be an absolutely crazy championship there. Of course, we mentioned 13 points in LMDh Pro, 8 points the gap in LMP3 Pro, and Aaron Cassels and Andrew Medell, the only 2 drivers that can win there, and Ethan Barford, as Ben Ford does in the LMDh Pro. Ethan Barford in the LMP3 Pro, or AM I should say, has a 13-point lead. So this is going to be interesting. It's going to be a bit of a job for us on the maths, Connery, but I think we're going to get through it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're trying to get the numbers whirring in the background. I know Hugo has tried to get the live points working on our overlays. We're trying to work out the spreadsheets in the background as well, just to give you an idea of where people are at when it comes to the race here today. We also got to remember that crucial bonus point for a fastest lap, which may factor into things, and it might, because some of these championships are oh so close. But the drivers are in qualifying at the moment as normal, so qualifying hasn't changed here. It's still 3 fast laps that they'll have to do inside of 10 minutes here. Oliver Etridge hasn't set a time just yet. He's just coming through towards the old pit straight, down towards Copse Corner now, and of course Etridge in contention there for that LMDh championship.
Yeah, and looking for a very important qualifying, because Etridge, 3 points back to get pole position would be a very big boost, not just for the championship, but really for the confidence going into that into this final race, I should say, as well. With it being a 300-kilometer race, longer than we've had so far this season, going to be a bit more of a challenge for all of our drivers to get all the way through. But I'm sure they've been putting in the laps, putting in the practice, and particularly for the championship contenders, I'm sure they've been on this all week.
Yeah, absolutely, and I have to try and suggest maybe that some of the drivers maybe practice having done at least a few practice laps in the wetter weather as well. It looks bone dry out there at the moment, actually pretty clear skies, all things considered here in qualifying, but we are expecting that cloud to build throughout the race session, and it does currently threaten on the forecast a little bit of rain towards the second half into the latter parts of the race. So obviously that is just a forecast error. We know we've been burned by iRacing forecasts before, and I mean, even in real life they say it's going to rain sometimes and it doesn't, or they say it's going to be completely dry and it tips it down. So we're really in a bit of an unknown situation here at the moment, and well, I guess that also applies to the drivers as well.
Yeah, it's a British forecast, isn't it? I mean, you can never be too sure. I mean, this is Northamptonshire after all. Silverstone can just throw up a shower from out of nowhere. So these drivers obviously will have been aware of that, may have practiced accordingly. But even if they haven't, they have to adapt if it does start to rain. But I think quite a few of them will be hoping that it stays dry, particularly the drivers that are doing quite well in that dry weather, because they won't want anything to put them off their races tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. Here comes William Foyle heading his way through and across the line in that LMDh Pro order. Goes 5th fastest for that number 44 machine. So that was his first flying lap, so he'll have 2 more to complete, and well, he'll really only be able to complete 1 more, given that we have such limited time left in this session. Drivers are unable to complete their lap if the clock strikes 0. That's just how the qualifying, at least in this format, with the solo qualifying works here in iRacing. Riding on board with Michael Mansfield as he heads his way out of Copse Corner, one of the most fun corners in the whole of motorsport, into another bunch of some of the most fun corners in motorsports. Maggots and Beckett's absolutely classic section, and a big roller coaster, especially in something with so much downforce like these LMP3 machines, and then you spat out a chapel on the way down the hangar straight. What a brilliant sequence.
Yeah, such a brilliant sequence that it's tried to be replicated, doesn't it, by Herman Tilke at Kota that comes to mind through that opening sector. It is just such an iconic set of corners, but so tricky to get exactly right because it is so fast. Getting off your line by just a touch means you could be losing a few hundredths, maybe into a tenth or two, which could really damage your lap with times that are really quite close between a lot of the drivers. Mansfield, through the final couple of corners, just has to keep it nice and tidy and make sure that the rear end sits with him as he gets the power down, because up to the line, this is going to be an important time for the 860 car. In the end, it'll be a 56.8, and he'll go P7.
P7 LMP3 AM. It's not at the back of the grid. Perhaps that will from a little bit more, but either way, it should be able to keep out of trouble. We've got Ethan Barford there, 3rd in LMP3 AM at the moment, and decides to abandon this particular lap there, and actually he's run out of laps to run in this qualifying session. Craig Curtis yet to set a time in the number 83 car at this stage as well. He will get one more opportunity, but getting back to the line from there may be a bit of an issue, because he's only, what, 30 seconds through the first sector, so yeah, probably not, unless he's very lucky.
I mean, he's got 1 minute left now. Yeah, he's going to miss it out by about 10 seconds, I think. So
yeah.
Craig Curtis, that's unfortunate for him, because starting at the back in the final, I mean, I guess, last to first in the final race, you never know what could happen, but it's not really going to give you that kind of boost that you need for the race.
And I'm just looking at the front of the LMDh Pro order because Ben Ford has pole position by a whole half a second over Will Foyle. So that is an incredible performance, nothing short of it in qualifying. And actually, obviously, Daniel Thomas, being the closest competitor to Ben Ford in terms of the championship, is actually starting down in, well, 4th place on the grid, only 3rd place in AM, in LMDHs, because Oliver Hedges, as the AM pole position sitter, is actually sitting 3rd on the overall starting grid here at the moment. So yeah, this not a great qualifying for Daniel Thomas, especially considering the pace that we know he does have.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting just to see how particularly that AM category starts the race, because it is so close in the championship. It is so tight that I think it's going to be quite cagey in the opening few laps, and we might start to see a few of the drivers settle only about lap 10, I reckon.
Absolutely. Right. It's going to be a long one, folks, or at least longer than we are used to. 300 kilometers of Silverstone, 51 laps is coming up in just a moment's time. But let's have a look at the starting grid then. Ben Ford takes pole position by just over half a second back to William Foyle. Daniel Thomas will start in 3rd on the LMDh order, but on the LMDh Pro order, but of course that's actually 4th in reality. Then you've also got Dan Shaw in 4th place in LMDh Pro, and then you have David Vey and Salvatore Garantio in P6. Seradov and Matthew Luke will be the last runners in LMDh Pro. Then in LMDh AM, you've got Oliver Ettridge taking pole position from Philip Canal. Then you've got Rocco Valentino and Luca Monroe. A handful of those, of course, championship contenders. Then you've got Patrick Den in that 5th place with Ash Hill in P6. Then you've got Cody Richards P7, Zed Murray in P8, Sean McArdle in P9, Louis Hesketh and Jamie Gibson will round out the 11-car LMDh AM category. Then you've got George Streetley in P1 in LMP3 Pro. Then you got Ant Castles by only 9 thousandths of a second between your leading LMP3 Pro cars. Then you've got Andrew Medell in P3 with James King in P4. In LMP3 AM, it looks like this. Aidan Carter takes pole position there from Franciszek Sikorsky. Then you've got Ethan Barford there down in 3rd place with Sophie Aronwen getting herself a 2nd row start in LMP3 AM. Then you've got Bella Usman and Cav Budd bringing things down to P6. Further back in LMP3 AM, it's Michael Mansfield in 7th, Linda Noble P8, Stuart Rice P9, and Craig Curtis in P10. An absolutely beautiful sight as the pace car rolls off with those prototypes behind it. It's the final round of the season here, Dara. Hopefully it's a bunch of fun. We'll get more time out there on circuit as well with the 51 laps that we have to run. Clear skies at the moment, you can see from the back of the car there, but that doesn't look like it's going to stay the same throughout the race. So pace car pulling down in towards the safety of pit lane, then field under the control of Ben Ford in that championship leading number 9 car. But things can change oh so easily in racing. You can't be complacent, especially on the start here of the final round of the championship. It's been a joy to broadcast this season for you. Let's go one more time. We're racing here at Silverstone in the Abruzzi Prototype Challenge.
Yeah, great stuff.
And we've already got a big
massive
one.
Crash.
Whoa!
Massive crash off of the line.
Yeah, already a big one. Multiple drivers involved in this one, as we will try and endeavor to give you the exact names because it happened oh so quickly. But William Foyle is involved in it. He slides down the order. Ben Ford obviously was ahead of all of it. Daniel Thomas was able to avoid 2 as well. So your championship contenders in LMDh Pro have gotten through that one unscathed. Yeah, that was a big instant into the first sector for the first time.
Yeah, and dramatic in the AM categories. They're all now massively jumbled up, but still Oliver Ettridge and Rocco Valentino have managed to come through in the LMP3s. You can see a little bit more mundane off of the line as they make their way to the end of Sector 1, getting tight 2 by 2, it seems, in towards Brooklands Corner and then into the long right-hander at Luffield. But important start for all of our championship contenders, and it remains to be seen how many of them have been taken out of contention.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm seeing Dan Shaw out of the race, down on towards the pit lane. Of course, these guys, they do get themselves one fast repair to use at any point over the course of this race. So if they did get a little bit of damage from that incident, then they can pull it down towards pit lane, now get the fast repair, or just get the repairs done when it comes towards the pit stops. But as you can see, the battling going on screen. Daniel Thomas trying to get ahead of Rocco Valentino, who was able to gain positions on the start. He has done so. So Daniel Thomas, a bit of P3 overall. He passed an AM driver there, so there's no change in actual position in class, but an important car out of the way.
Yeah, and it's really interesting, actually, because in the top 10 at the moment, there are 5 AMs and 5 pros for the LMDHs, so it really is a completely jumbled bag. And you can see that gap at the front, 2.9 seconds that Ben Ford has over Daniel Thomas at the moment. Critical time for him to try and maintain. But Oliver Extrage, Rocco Valentino, they're involved at the front. A couple of those LMDH AM cars, though, have slipped towards the back when they were looking for championship contention. So they've got a little bit of work to do, and it's going to be difficult for them to come back through with such an early incident.
Yeah, so it's interesting to see all of this jumbled up. You can see that Philip Carnell in the number 7 trying to lead this little group in cars with Luca Monroe involved. Of course, Luca, he was concerned that he was going to lose his race win at Suzuka, but it ended up coming through with the steward's review that he was home and clear. So he was able to score the points there. So I imagine he was very happy about that, but he's looking for some form of repeat here at Silverstone, or at least of a good performance, at least a podium, potentially even the championship if things go his way. But that would be an interesting mathematical quandary for him, considering he's a lot of things going right.
Yeah, I mean, that's the replay of the start. Dan Shaw in the number 99 car getting caught up in it. Yeah, I mean, look at this. Through the open... Oh, my word, that is a massive old incident and a big hit on the side. A real shame for those guys, but, I mean, still time to recover if they can get that car repaired. I was going to mention very quickly that in the... I have double-checked the timing pages, and in the AM and the Pro, the top 5 in the championship in the LMDH AM are the top 5 on the road at the moment. So the championship is well and truly alive. And in the LMP3 AMs, the top 3 in the championship are the top 3 on the road. So our championship pictures are going to be a little bit easier when they're all at the front.
It absolutely is, but you can see we're cycling through a couple of the replays there. That happens as we got ourselves on the start there. This is a battle for the positions further down in the LMDH category. This is the AM battle between Louis Hesketh and Zed Murray. They had a bit of a side-by-side moment as Murray goes a little deep, almost tagging the back of the number 194 ahead. But in the end, they kept themselves clean and clear. But with the situation elsewhere, so we got the live points. There we go. On the top right-hand side of your screen, those are the current standings in the LMDH Pro category. Ben Ford, right now, if they finish as they are, will win the championship with Dan Thomas in second place, William Foyle in third. So essentially the same positions as they came into today.
Yeah, and that it does include Ben Ford picking up the fastest lap, so that's always just the 1 point to be slightly wary about, because that may change. But a 21-point gap at the moment is difficult for Daniel Thomas to bridge, because he can get past Ben Ford, but he needs even more places than that to overturn the current championship advantage. So Ben Ford looking comfortable, especially with that 4-second lead, but I don't think he'll want to sit on his laurels at all.
No, absolutely not. He can't afford to. Yes, he has been used to trying to get these gaps, especially in the back end of the season. It was a struggle to get going for Ben Ford, all things considered. But once he's gotten going, there's really no stopping him at this stage in the championship. But of course, we still have that looming spectre of the weather, maybe a little bit later on. But, you know, that always factors into the considerations, obviously. You know, sometimes you have to race with the current conditions and the current conditions only, because that's the only thing you can necessarily do anything about. But with that on the horizon, yeah, that could shake things up. So yeah, if Ben Ford, say, if it does rain, and again, it's a big if it does rain, he comes in at the wrong time, makes the wrong decision, that's that 4 seconds advantage gone instantly.
Yeah, and that's going to be playing on his mind if he can't increase that gap. He did, of course, increase that gap out, quite substantially last week at Suzuka in a dominant display. But again, that's not here. That's a completely different race. He picked up the points there, but you reset when you come to this new track, of course, at Silverstone, and he's going to have to dial it in again and maybe try and pull that kind of gap just to give himself some breathing room, because Daniel Thomas, very, very competent driver in his own right. But I think in the back of Ben Ford's head, he will know, obviously, that finishing P2 to Daniel Thomas still wins him this title. So he has got the ability to, have a little bit of respite in the championship regard, but he will not want to be, racing on the likes of David Vey, Salvatore Guarantino, who are currently 3rd and 4th in class, and hoping that they can't overtake him as well. He'll just want to go out in front, lead the race for as long as he can, and try and take all of the points he can get, really.
Luca Monroe was able to get up into 3rd place in the AM category in the LMDh AM order, and you can see the live standings of that category on the right-hand side of your screen right now. So if they finish as they are, Oliver Ettridge would win the championship. He'd be up 1 place compared to Philip Carnell from the start of the race in terms of championship order. So that would be a swap around there. Luca Monroe, he's also up 1 place compared to Patrick Dent. So Luca Monroe right now, he would improve his position up into 3rd in the championship if the race finished as it is.
He would, but of course it's not quite the championship. I think that's what he will be setting his sights on.
Close, but...
It is, yeah. It's going to be tight all the way through. I mean, you could see that the gap is, 5 points between Philip Cannell, Luca Monroe and Patrick Dent at the moment, and they are running 3rd, 4th and 5th. So those positions can change around in a heartbeat, and we're going to have to, see if the likes of Patrick Dent can make a couple of positions up and go from 4th or maybe even 2nd in the championship in just making 2 positions. It could be really critical for him as we make our way through. But by far, LMDh AM is the tightest championship battle, but at the moment, Oliver Ettridge in the live championship with a 10-point advantage right now is only because of the fact that he's winning the race. If he loses that lead, that's going to become a lot more dangerous.
Yeah, it absolutely is, and those are just the calculations based off of the current running, because of obviously we haven't factored in any pit stops, any weather, or anything at this point. So we're still at the very, very early stages, of this race, and that's one thing actually we haven't talked about, Dara. It is the strategy, because yes, it's a longer race, but they have the same amount of fuel on board as they would for the actual 1-hour races. So we'll have to see how that factors in. Have you been doing anything in the background, Dara, to try and figure out maybe what options the drivers have, or is it really just sort of a play-by-feel sort of situation?
Well, hey, my maths tells me that we're going at about 1 minute 45 a lap, aren't we? And we're going to do about 50 laps. So realistically, the race is going to be, about an 87, 88 minute length if we just go straight through. We've seen in the 1-hour races how the drivers have been able to really extend that stint past the 50-minute point. So I think we should be able to see the drivers get this done on 1 stop, but it means that the window is tighter. So I think we're going to see a lot of action in a relatively short time when it comes to the pit lane, but I cannot see a need for drivers to come down to the pit lane twice, especially considering the length of pit lane here at Silverstone. You do not want to come down twice unless you absolutely have to.
You do have the slight condition here is that you do use quite a chunk of fuel at this circuit. It's quite a high-speed circuit, right? So maybe a tight window plus having high fuel consumption, could potentially spell a little bit of trouble for a couple of drivers if they're not watching it too carefully.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're looking at, 25 laps. It's going to be about 80 minutes, give or take. But it means that window where drivers were pitting in the first 15, 20 minutes in a 1-hour race, they just cannot do that if they want to get to the end here. They'll have to wait past the 40-minute mark, obviously past about 25, 26 to really make that work on the 1 stop. They may go a little bit earlier, but then that's going to be touch and go whether they have to do the 2. I think for the championship contenders, the likes of Ben Ford winning that race, the likes of Aiken Carter winning the LMP3 AM race, they're just going to do it as easy as they possibly can because they don't want to add any kind of risk to the position and the points that they're currently gaining.
Absolutely. It's fantastic to get that insight. We'll see what the drivers are planning with regards to that. You can see that Ethan, well, we see MP3 AM standings on the right-hand side at the moment. No change inside the top 3 if they finished as they are right now. So Ethan Barford would be crowned the champion there if we ended the race now. But yeah, it is great to talk about these things, talk about the strategy. Of course, drivers will have a plan potentially going into this. Some of them actually might not, and they just go, well, let's see what happens in the race then, I suppose. You know, there's a couple of different philosophies that you could really use to approach these sorts of races. Some drivers like to be super prepared. They're going to be knowing what they're doing on each lap and have everything back planned from the end of the race. But some just go in, just go, okay, we'll see what happens, see whatever situation is. What battles am I in? Am I in clear air? Am I in clear air, excuse me? Do I have a bit of traffic ahead of me, especially if I'm in the LMDh category? Things, you know, played a little bit more flexible rather than more rigid.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the challenge of this particular championship, is just to be flexible, because the situations are going to change, and with a 5-round championship, you cannot afford too many dropped rounds in terms of the amount of points you get. So you've got to be on it, and they've been on it all the way through. I notice actually that there's been an issue for Franciszek Sikorski. Was running in the top 3 in the LMP3 AM category, now down in P8, just made a move for P8, was behind Michael Mansfield, but got the move done now. Sikorski came into Suzuka last week with quite a margin. Yeah, there you go. He came into the race with quite a margin at Suzuka, had an awful race, didn't finish that race, and lost all of those points, and now having this issue. Only P3 in the championship, and with a mountain to climb.
Yeah, big comeback having to be made now. I do want to mention, if our wonderful producer Hugo could pull up the weather radar. I know sometimes we have the capability of doing it, but I do, on mine, see a couple of colors arriving. So yeah, it's starting to maybe show some signs that a little bit later on, it's appearing on the radar now that the well, we'll get the radar up ourselves in just a few minutes, but for what I'm seeing, there is a little bit of a front coming in.
That could spice it up, couldn't it? You know, adding a little bit of rain to a race like this, with the kind of tension that some of these drivers will be feeling, will just, you know, accelerate, I think, all of those emotions from the drivers. Is an inside line move this is going to be, as they make their way in towards Brooklands and Luffield. Sarah Dove are looking for it for P4 in the LMDh Pro, not able to do it into Luffield, but if you know that there's rain on the horizon, you're likely to want to get those moves done sooner rather than later, because you just do not want to know what the situation is going to be when rain starts falling on the circuit.
Yeah, if the rain falls at the wrong time, like outside the pit stop window, that make this a 2-stop race, if not more. Depending on how the rain, if the rain stays around, does it leave quickly? Is it going to be here for an extended period? Do you even decide to come in, even if it's a short shower, but not heavy enough to be to waterlog the track? You know, those are all the decisions that the drivers will have to make. And I really wouldn't like to be in the driver's seat at the moment, sort of seeing that weather on the horizon, just going, oh, this is going to get very complicated very quickly.
Yeah, I'm more than happy sitting up here with my spreadsheet with all my numbers, watching the race rather than having to do the actual somewhat more pressured scenario of driving these cars with so much on the line for quite a few of these guys. And it's worth reminding people who are maybe tuning into this series for the first time that these guys are not the most experienced drivers on the iRacing platform. They haven't been around for years and years. Some of them, this is their first competitive championship, and they are doing such a good job, and we've seen such good clean racing. We've seen so many great moments. And it's great experience for those drivers, but when you're in a championship battle, you know, it adds the pressure. It doesn't matter how experienced you are, you're all going to be feeling it the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And currently, yeah, so you are absolutely right. These drivers are not going to be the expert. Well, they're not experts in the dry, let alone in the wet. So this is going to be a very interesting predicament here. If that forecast does pull off, and it's looking relatively likely now, because we have the proof in the pudding with regards to the radar picture. You can see it on the bottom right-hand side of your screen right there. There is a bit of green, bit of blue, bit of dark green, signifying some precipitation coming in from the west.
That's far too, you know, straight of a front for the UK, isn't it?
Yeah.
Normally it just appears in a blob somewhere, and it might be raining where you are. You can see some rain over the hill, but in the middle there's nothing. So, but either way, it's ominous, isn't it? Especially if you're driving and you can see it approaching above you. The only thing I would say, though, is looking at that radar, it doesn't seem like it's a heavy front, if that makes sense. It seems that there are, you know, some pockets behind it. The track shouldn't get too wet. It just depends how heavy that initial shower is, because we could be in a situation where we are wet track, dry tyres kind of thing. We'll just have to see, because that looks... It doesn't look as wet as it could be, I think is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, and obviously there are a couple of gaps in that front as well, aren't there? So it could be the situation that maybe it rains all around Silverstone, but never on Silverstone. I've seen that sort of weather pattern happen before at some circuits as well. So it wouldn't be a foreign concept whatsoever for it to be raining everywhere but the circuit.
Oh, particularly in the UK. I think we saw it in F1 a couple of years ago at Silverstone, where it was raining everywhere but the circuit, and I think people were begging it to finally rain on the circuit to spice up the race. But yeah, it can happen. But you know, if there's a sprinkle, if there's a downpour, these drivers are going to have to be adapting. And in a championship finale, to have that hanging over your head, it's really going to separate those champions from the people that, you know, get so close but not quite close enough.
Absolutely, and well, when/if that rain arrives, we'll then have to talk about crossover points and, you know, what's an acceptable fall off in the dry tyres before you have to come down in. All fun topics on the horizon, folks. But with the race as it is at the moment, under these dry conditions, there's Ben Ford leading by 4.1 seconds in the LMDh Pro category. That's kind of stabilized out a little bit. It hasn't extended that much over the last, 5-6 laps or so. We have a car spun around. That's David Vey from third place in LMDh Pro, and actually loses the position in LMDh Pro there as well. Yeah, he's down into P4 in class. So that is a little bit of an awkward one for David Vey. Didn't quite see exactly what caused the incident there for the number 54 Porsche. But yeah, now he's going to be sitting up behind Sarah Dove by about 1.6 seconds. Oh, it was a tag from behind. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, I'm not too sure he'll be too pleased about that, David, in the 54 car. I'm not too sure who it was pushing him around, but definitely somebody. There's no question about that.
Sophie Aaron went.
Oh, Sophie Aaron went. Oh, that's such a shame for Sophie.
Yeah, LMP3. So...
interesting.
It's an interesting incident, actually, isn't it? Because it was a lapping procedure between the LMP3 and the LMDh. LMDh threw along in the inside, and it's just the tiniest of contacts, I get the feeling, because I think David Vey was intending to slide up ahead of the LMP3, but the timing between the two of them just sort of wasn't really there. Sophie ran a little bit of a tighter line coming off the corner, and they ended up having that small tap that ended up being a big spin for the number 54.
Yeah, and I mean, for David, it's gutting in the race, considering that up in P3 was doing a fantastic job. I guess the silver lining would be
he's
that,
off again.
Oh, hello.
Big smoke.
Yeah.
Yeah, there he is. Well, he's off.
Yeah,
it's David Vey again. Yeah.
Oh,
so, back on the circuit. Oof. Was there any floor damage that maybe from that bit of contact that then made the car super unstable coming through Copse Corner? That is a very scary part of the circuit to have a big off. Going off at Copse, yeah, you're sort of holding your breath, aren't you?
Yeah, it's such a fast corner, and such commitment needed by these drivers through it, and sadly for David Vey, I'm likely to have some damage, because not a mistake we've seen from anybody so far. I noticed that there's battling going on in LMDh AM. Valentino had a Munro. Maybe it was just a bit of a timing page glitch, but there was definitely some movement there. But regardless, on the point of David Vey, I mean, difficult for him, but not being in the championship picture, at least it's not, you know, going to cost him too much in the big picture.
Yeah, yeah, you can think about it like that. I mean, like you said, yeah, it's one position in the end, and he's well, at least originally one position, and well, still is one position, like you mentioned. So even though it's a big spin, big loss of time, excuse me, the points loss for David Vey is actually not that massive. But as you can see, we've still got a couple of battles out there on circuit. The one we're watching right now is the one between Cody Richards and Jamie Gibson. This is for P6 and 7 in the LMDh AM category. So these guys are getting relatively close together. They got a bit of LMP3 traffic ahead. They're going to have to negotiate, dive towards the driver's right-hand side, down into the entry for Copse Corner, and they're able to get through relatively safe and unscathed. But this is where getting traffic through Maggots and Beckett is going to be a big issue, and it looks like they'll encounter that situation potentially, unless they time it right, so they can pass James King just coming off the corner, and it looks like it's going to be perfectly timed between the two of them.
I think Jamie Gibson's got a little bit of a run here as they make their way down in towards Stowe Corner. Actually, not too much of a run in the end, but Jamie Gibson definitely could be trying to use some of these lapped cars and these LMP3s to benefit his line, maybe seeing the driver in front get caught up a little bit and taking full advantage of it, but not able to do it through or down in towards Stowe with the move done through Chapel and onto the Hangar Straight. But in the end, Jamie Gibson sticking behind, but still in it. I mean, he got taken out right at the start of the race in Suzuka, so already doing better than that in his regard, but going a little bit wide at turn 1, maybe that's some dirty air, but it's not where you want to be, especially where you're looking for the overtake.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we saw a big effect from the dirty air at Suzuka coming through that first sector, and of course here it can be a big factor as well with the medium to high speed corners that we have around this particular circuit. But having a look back, that's Salvatore Guarantio currently in a little bit of a fight with, or at least a little bit of a procedure with the LMP3s heading through there. That number 21 is trying to chase down David Vey, who of course has had issues over the course of this race, and well, we've caught replays of a few of them. David Vey definitely on the back foot here, but if he's able to hold position to the next pro driver, then potentially he might see it as a little bit of a recovery, and well, it could have been worse, I suppose. Just like Jamie Gibson's spin coming through there, the number 25 having a bit of a issue. That's the LMDh AM driver who was trying to get onto the back of Cody Richards, but ends up about 6 seconds behind now.
Yeah, still in P7, but now going from attacker to defender, because right behind him now is the driver currently in P8 in class, Louis Hesketh. So gone from doing some attacking to now having to do a little bit of defending, so getting the best of both worlds.
Yeah, you just sometimes have to do that big old switch as we get the lapping procedure underway between this particular grouping of cars. As long as you don't catch them in a really tricky place here at Silverstone, like I said with Maggots and Beckett, generally it's pretty okay for to be able to get past lap traffic. A catastrophic miss apex there through the first part of Vale, but we will continue on with this one. We've got 14 laps done of 51. If we were to run at this pace, not including pit stops, it'll take about an hour and 6 minutes for us to complete the rest of the laps from here. At least that's the calculation. Actually, scratch that. That is completely wrong. That's in time until the very end of the session, the time limit that's put on the end of the session. Not necessarily the end of the race, I don't think. But you might have a better calculation than I did, Aaron.
I'm going to be honest, I think I'll find it easy when we've got like 30 laps left and I can do some easier math, but we can work it out.
Actually, no, it's close to an hour, I think. I think
that's outright.
I should trust in my calculations a little bit more. I shouldn't be upping and ahhing, just going, maybe I think it's this. I should say, yes, it is this. And then if someone calls me out in the comments, I'd just be like, well, whatever. It's like I'm trying to do 5 things at once. It's absolutely fine. But the rain on the radar still there, hasn't gone anywhere. So it looks more and more sure that will be affecting the race at some point. Currently, I have it 45% chance. I mean, it's been 45% chance for a while, but of course, with the exact timings of it, that's the only thing really that we don't quite know at the moment. It's really interesting being in this position because, fun fact, Dara, I've never commentated a race in the rain on iRacing. I've missed it every single time.
No! Wow!
No!
You've been missing out. So I've done some what are they? Super Formula Lights cars in the wet. Now that's fun. That's not fun though. Down in towards the Vale chicane, big hit from Salvatore Guarantino there. He'll lose a lot of ground in front, but the LMP3 lucky I think to make it through that corner without spinning around.
Yeah, absolutely. We could have had a bit of an incident between LMDh and LMP3 traffic there, and a bit of a shoulder. Sean McCardle rounds. So the number 92 pointed in the wrong direction there. This is the back end of the LMDh AM order now, or rather Sean McCardle is at the back of the AM order for the moment. And Sikorsky down onto, what? Where's that? Trying to get on towards pit lane, maybe, and that's a weird one.
Power through the Bell chicane. The rear end can step out a little bit. I think he's just put a little bit too much throttle on. And found himself in the grass there. Let's see. Oh, no, that's the sausage curve. That's what it was. Rather than too much power. But finding a part of the circuit not many drivers often find. So doing some exploration there.
It would have been a catastrophically illegal pit entry from there, but you had to get the pit entry well back before you even enter in towards Club Corner there, which is where he went off. So yeah, that's a bit of an awkward one, all things considered. But we do continue on with this race. Gaps are spread out just a little bit, especially in terms of race leading things. We've got Ben Ford holds almost 5 seconds over Daniel Thomas here at the moment, so we're not expecting that much change there. It's still under threat, you know, if something creative happens in the pit stops or if we get weather affected, that's still not a comfortable margin to be sitting in. Not the biggest leading margin we've seen throughout the season either. So definitely still competitive there. Salvatore Grancio trying to get himself through on a couple of cars there. In fact, does go through on Jamie Gibson in the AM category. And steadily trying to give chase to David Vey in 4th in the LMDh Pro order at the moment. But it's, Linda Noble into the back of, I can't quite find the car number there. But that was a bit of a weird incident. We just sort of joined that one halfway through.
We did, but I just want to say quickly, did my eyes deceive me, or is that rain?
That is rain. On
the camera. So this is early as well, so this could really spice things up. I was going to very quickly mention as well that looking at the gap, as I mentioned before, Ben Ford doesn't, Daniel Thomas doesn't just need to finish ahead of Ben Ford, but needs Ben Ford to finish lower than second. I think third or worse would do it. Sarah Dove is nearly half a minute behind Ben Ford at the moment, so looking very good for the number 9 car. As that is not looking too good for the 25. Gibson to the wall. Yeah.
Oh, and it's very quickly raining. Actually, it's not like drizzle. It is coming down because you can see the spray coming off the car tires now. So what decisions do you make as the drivers? Is it hard enough to come down in immediately? Can you survive out there another lap and still get the best, most optimal time out of it? We currently do not know. Salvatore, despite the conditions, is going to go for a move down in towards Stoke Corner here on David Vey. Commits down the inside. Can he get that car stopped with potentially limited traction from the maybe little amount of rain that rests on the circuit at the moment? He can. So he gets that move done. Despite the changeable conditions, but pushes wide to the first apex. This might give an opening on the inside for David Vey to come back through. He tries to get towards the inside of Club Corner and across the line, but David Vey not able to respond. Grantiu does gain the position, but when do you come down in? Because I think it's inevitable at this point.
Yeah, what an incredibly bold and brave move from Salvatore there to get P4, and we'll continue on maybe to try and get after Sarah Dove for P3, but the battles don't stop there because this is Cody Richards on the back of Patrick Dern. Of course, top 5 in the championship, still top 5 in the race, but Cody Richards trying his absolute best to stop that from happening around the outside. All the way. Oh, is it an up and under from Cody Richards? He's trying everything to get through on Philip Cannell here. Inside line at Woodcote should do it because we'll have the inside line at Copse as well.
Yeah, I see Patrick Den on the camera's right-hand side there, side by side in towards Copse Corner as the track is just getting wetter and wetter. You might see these cars start to struggle for traction in just a couple of laps' time. Patrick Den not giving up on this position. No, they almost make contact in towards Maggots and Beckett. Patrick Den has to back out of it and lose a good couple of tenths of a second on the entry to such a high-speed section. Where they're really going to start to feel the performance of those slick tires just start to drop away at this stage. We still have about an hour until the end of the race as well in terms of laps, so this might even make this at least a 2-stop race.
Yeah, this is kind of opened the door for anything, hasn't it, now? I mean, we've only just completed 1/3 of the race, 17 laps done, which leaves 34 to go. My darts has helped me with that. 17, 51 anyway. It's going to be interesting just to see how drivers cope with this. Do they just try and stay out, even though we're seeing a couple of cars go very wide at the final corner? Someone went very off there. It's going to be really important for the drivers to make a decision quickly on what's best for them. As I think that was it Canal? No, it's Patrick Den, I should say, going around. But they're going to have to make the decisions quickly because they're going to be effective for the rest of the for the rest of their races.
Ooh, Patrick Den of the big off. Yeah, that's the big off in towards the tyres. And, well, rejoining the circuit. Thankfully, there's a fast repair for them to use. Careful with the rejoins there, folks. You can see some cars getting very, very squirrely at this stage. This is Michael Mansfield getting all sorts of out of shape. So we're seeing more spins here. We're seeing more drifts or more issues here for Dara as the grip just starts to drop away from these drivers. There's Rocco Valentino having a bit of an off. This is typically what we see even in real life racing when we have dry tires on a circuit that's just getting damper and damper. This is what tends to happen.
Yeah, and I think this is where some experience for some of these drivers is going to really come into play. We're seeing a lot of these spins happening when the drivers are running over the exit curb. So, oh, there's a massive off there into Woodcut. There's been collection as well. That's a massive incident. I'm not too sure who was involved there as we worked our way through. But that's, yeah, Hesketh and Guarantino as well in the pro category, and that's missing a rear wing. I was just saying how a lot of these incidents are happening over these curbs, and I think the same happened there with Guarantino on the inside of the corner.
Yeah, absolutely. Avoid. You have to, if you're a driver and you're listening to this, somehow you're listening to the broadcast while driving. I don't know if I could do that. Avoid the curbs and painted lines from this point forwards because we have. Oh, my word, that is a crazy onboard there from Hesketh, and somehow holds it despite the odds. That's crazy. He does have a bit of damage, but wow, that was absolutely insane. Returning to my point though, Dara, painted lines and curbs, don't go there now.
Yeah, no, they are your worst enemy. It might be just a nice little strip of white paint that was put there a few years ago, but realistically, in this kind of situation, it is just the thing you want to avoid the most, as we see side by side in towards or out of Stowe corner. Oh my word, nearly an incident as they make their way down towards Vale. You're right, there are pitters, including for Sarah Dove, as someone else goes in. I think it was Guarantino, which means, though, that the gap between first and third in LMDh Pro is 51 seconds. And that's going to be absolutely huge if Benford loses it now.
I think they have to come down in now. Benford is 11 seconds down in his delta for this particular lap. They have to come down in now. Otherwise, they're just going to be losing too much time. I think maybe potentially if they're going to try and stick it out, I guess it's, you know, if they think rain's going to end now and they'll make back the time in the pit stop. But like you mentioned just before, Dara, this is a short pit lane here at Silverstone. You don't lose that much time when push comes to shove. So why not come down in?
No, exactly. I mean, you've been given the options. Bilal Usman's going around. Luca Monroe has overtaken Rocco Valentino for P2 in the LMDh class, which provisionally moves him up to P2 overall in the championship, overtaking Philip Canal. So even moves in that top 5 can be really quite important for a lot of these drivers. As I mean, this is just carnage now, isn't it, Godwin?
Yep. Yeah, Sarah Dove on wet tyres. First, that's the highest placed driver on the wet tyres at the moment. Cody Richards has also come down in, same with Louis Hesketh. Ash Hill, Salvatore Grantio. Sean McCardle has also come down in. Dan Thomas in. Dan Thomas in at this stage in the race, surely for a set of wet tyres. Benford is still out there. We'll see if Benford comes down in because he has been losing a lot of time out there. I have been watching his lap times. Last lap time actually was a 1:58.6. And when you consider, and they were doing, at least in qualifying trim, 1:42.9s as a pole position, that's a huge amount of lost time. And Benford is struggling out there. I can say for sure he's struggling out there. If we can get the picture on him potentially, he's going to have to try and baby this car back towards the pit lane. And he's got Copse Corner, Maggots and Beckett's where he's just going to have to go so slow through. Yeah, he's slowing it right down. He's right there. You see, he can't hold it. He can't hold it through Copse. This is huge.
This is huge, but at the same time, he knows he's got that massive advantage over the net P3 driver, Sarah Dove, who is on that wet tyre of over 1 minute and 20 seconds. If he can baby this car back to the pit lane and get out ahead of Sarah Dove, all should be well. Daniel Thomas can win this race, of course, as long as Ben Ford doesn't finish. I'm going to try and do the maths very quickly. Ben Ford actually needs to finish down in P4 for Dan Thomas to have a sniff here. So it's looking okay for Ben Ford. He just needs to manage this in a way that doesn't damage the car in any way.
Yeah, Sarah Dove also did come down in. David Vey's not in yet, so that might be the saving grace here. There's Louis Hesketh having a big moment in the wet conditions. As Ben Ford, you can see him on the bottom right-hand screen, side of the screen. He has come down in now for the wet tyres, but maybe it was a lap too late. Like you said, championship, it's still looking okay for Ben Ford at the moment. There's Sikorsky having a big moment there as well, but Ford has definitely made this more complicated than it needs to be. Andrew Maddell having a bit of an issue as well, and that's important for the championship down in LMP3 Pro 2.
Ooh. And there's more cars down there as well. Cody Richards, I don't know where he's going. I don't know if he's trying to set the old Silverstone layout, but that is not the layout that we're using today. I think he is trying to go towards Brooklands with the shortcut, but disaster for Andrew Maddell to slip down to P4, almost certainly handing Ant Cassels a fantastic opportunity at the title, and in the live championship, Ant Cassels will lead that by what will be, what is that, 14 points, so looking good for Cassels at the moment. Den going around damages his championship options, but Ben Ford, Ettrich, Munro, they're all in the pit lane, so Gorski's in the pit lane as well. This is all happening now.
Yeah, and Murray having an issue as well. Usman's going to have another one. Usman, mate, you have to avoid those white lines because it's been catastrophic for you every single time. James King having a big off. I mean, it might be better if I just say who hasn't had a big off at this point, because I don't even think anyone has. Or at least has been able to avoid it.
No, I think you're right, actually. This is, it's just been absolutely crazy. Note as well that with that earlier pit stop, Daniel Thomas is ahead of Ben Ford on the circuit by a nice 6 seconds. But I don't think Ben Ford will be too worried about that. You can see Sarah Dove is another half a minute behind him anyway. And then it'll be back to P4, which I think he'll be really concerned about. Or he might be concerned about, but I don't think he really will be. Salvatore Guarantino going around now. And I thought he towed for a second there, but no, back on the circuit. Munro had been in, Ettrich had been in. Munro now leads the race. Ettrich did before, and if I'm not heavily mistaken, that in the championship live standings puts Munro into championship winning position.
Dude was almost crying when he got a race win at Silverstone. At Suzuka, excuse me. I had to think what he'll say or do when potentially there it is. Like, I hope Munro is not listening to this, because he might have a bit of a meltdown if he's if he was to hear that he's currently leading the championship. Just got to stay calm and just got to get it to the end now. It's still a long race to go. We're still not even at the halfway point just yet. So some deep breaths and try and get it to the end, because wow, that would be a heck of a story.
Be a massive story if Munro can carry this one off. He'd currently be only winning the championship by just the 5 points as well, so it's pretty tight. Philip Cannell still got the opportunity to try and get up there as well. He's only 10 points back from Munro in the live standings. As that's Ash Hill going off of the circuit, rejoining. Got to be careful, don't crash into anybody. I think Ash done a good enough job to avoid everybody there. My word, this has been a dramatic 10 minutes of this race. It's all changed around. This is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, and guess what? The iRacing says the track is lightly wet, which is the most. I don't know if that's an understatement. I dread to think what a sodden wet track would do with these drivers, but yeah, that's. It's interesting to see what a slightly wet track does to these sorts of races, and it looks like, you know, the rain's going to vary in intensity here for a bit. It might even have a little bit of a break in a couple of minutes' time, but then there will be another little cell behind it coming through and add in more precipitation. So so the grip levels out there, Dara, will actually vary as time goes on here with the intensity of the rain. So this is why rain racing is so interesting, because that optimal line is going to be changing as the race goes on, because of course, you know, they've been running in the dry, they had qualifying practice, they had the start of this race in the dry. There's going to be a rubbered in line. the fastest line in the wet is not going to be on the rubbered-in line. But of course, as cars run over different lines, it will disperse the water. So therefore, maybe the line might slightly shift. Big incident in the pit lane. That is, and Castell's in the wall with his teammate close behind.
Yeah, and Castell's, of course, championship leader in the LMP3 Pro, so that could be huge for the 87 car. I think he's got away with it somewhat, but George Greatley, his teammate, still involved, or well, not involved, but right behind him, and well, I say his teammate, they've got the same livery on, but, you know, that could change the picture of the championship. You know, in any way, shape or form, there's only 4 cars in LMP3 Pro, but we've still got a really tight battle. Another thing to mention about Luca Munro at the moment, again, I hope he's not listening, he comes into this race P4 in the championship, but is currently with that 11.5 second lead leading the championship, which would be an incredible story to go fourth to first in the final race.
Valentino out, by the way. I think there may have been confusion in the pit stop because he was still on dry tyres at this point. Pretty much everyone, with the exception of well, yeah, with the exception of Valentino, is on the wet tyres. So I think he might have just clicked the wrong button in the pit stop potentially and still put dry tyres on, and then he just went straight on at one of the corners. I was winding it back myself. But you can see the battle here. This was Philip Cannell and Patrick Den. This is 4th and 5th in the LMDh AM category. Relatively close on circuit together, but I get the feeling these gaps are going to fluctuate a massive amount as drivers try to find their footing with the current conditions.
No, I think you're right here. I mean,
so you can see how much Den's catching through Beckett and Beckett. He's found a good line through there that Cannell has not quite found.
No, and he's doing an incredibly good job at trying to just, you know, use these conditions to his advantage. Exactly what he needs to be doing at this stage. But on the back of Cannell, I mean, Cannell came into this race leading the championship. As it stands, we'll lose it by 8 points. Den comes into this tied with Oliver Ettridge, 3 points behind Cannell. So absolutely needs to be ahead of Philip to have any hope of winning this championship, and knows that, I'm sure. And will be looking for the move anywhere he can, but so difficult to pick a line to make a move in these wet conditions when, like you said before, the racing line isn't your normal racing line. The lines you have to take to overtake have now changed, and finding those lines can be difficult, but it's part of the challenge, part of the fun, and I have to say, still cannot believe this is the first time you've seen rain on iRacing, Connery.
Well, I've been in it, I've been a driver, so Den looks down the inside here. Not quite going to get it done. Of course, down on the inside there, that's where the rubber isn't. So that's potentially where a bit of grip is. Coming down into the corner, but as soon as you get onto the rubbered line and try to apply some power, that's what happens.
Yeah, and that is not good news at all if your name is Patrick Den. Actually held a little bit further back, so should be able to stay in P5, but you do not want to be losing any more ground at all. As Patrick Den, you can see it again coming in, just losing the rear end in the middle of the corner. So easy in these prototype cars just to lose control when the conditions are variable like this.
Yep, they absolutely are. So, slow on the apex there as Ant Castles was coming all the way around. Still maintains P2 in LMP3 Pro, does Ant Castles, so despite the incident that he had, still in a decent position. And I guess that's pit lane, or at least pit lane entry, is the best place to have an incident when you have a fast repair available.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. If you're nearby, I mean, it'll help you out, won't it? But not what you want to see if you're Ant Castells leading the championship with a car going slow in the middle of the road, just trying to avoid them. You want to have a nice, smooth day, but you're not going to get that when we've still got another, what, 27 laps at the end of this one to go. I mean, we're running at about 2 minutes a lap, give or take, around that margin, which means we have still got nearly an hour left of this race. You said the session clock has 52 minutes. I think we're going to be needing most of those, if not all of them. So a long way to go for these guys, but Daniel Thomas will love this to go as long as he possibly can, because on that last lap was 3 seconds faster than Ben Ford.
Wow. Found a line potentially that so that's why we see these big fluctuations in lap times. So yeah, that's just the situation there. We're currently watching this Gibson and Cannell battle for 3rd place in AM here at the moment, which is still actually your closest battle out on circuit at the moment. But yeah, I do sense and I do see that, big spin for Jamie Gibson. Oh, that one is a little bit embarrassing. as it was the same place as we saw a spin a couple of laps ago, coming up through Aintree, down on towards the Wellington Straits, just car swaps around. Again, too eager on the throttle in the wrong part of the circuit, potentially.
Yeah, and it promotes Philip Cannell up to third, and that puts him in a position where he's tied with Oliver Ettridge for second, but still 5 points behind Luca Munro, who currently leads the championship. So in LMDh Pro, top 2 in the championship, top 2 in the race. LMDh Am, top 3 in the championship, top 3 in the race. LMP3 Pro breaks that trend because second and third are the top 2 in the championship. But in LMP3 Am, top 2 in the championship, top 2 in the race. So I mean, we've got a bit of a running theme here, but the winners of the races are going to be oh so critical in deciding who takes home the championships tonight.
So we have a bit of a break in the rain at the moment. It's not currently raining, so the track, for at least this period of time, is going to get a bit faster as that water gets cleared. But there is on the radar a cell, or at least a bit more green, behind where we're currently at. So this is a temporary break in the weather here, Dara, but it will come back maybe in maybe 5-10 minutes time.
That's the question. How dry does it get in the next 5-10 minutes? Drainage around this circuit is pretty good. Not, of course, perfect, but we'll see what happens with some of this standing water around the circuit, how quickly it can move. Remember, we have got... well, we have got in total, what, 30 cars going around the circuit at the moment, consistently trying to, you know, clear some of this standing water. So this could change. I mean, the pace could come back to the likes of Ben Ford. I mean, last lap it was 3 seconds. Last time around, the gap was absolutely nothing. We'll get another reading in a few seconds again to see what the lap difference was as Ben Ford's about to cross the line. It was a 59.3 Daniel Thomas. No,
yeah, sorry to interrupt. Gibson's just lost positions again. So Carnell is ahead, Den is ahead. So potentially an issue for Gibson in the last couple of moments in the number 25 car. So that's just come through, sorry. And then we get the replay of it. Ooh, careful, 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 careful. Oh, just a tag with the wall on the inside.
Yeah, it's not. He's not had the nicest of times in that car. It's not sat well with him, has it? The rear end going all over the place. Just to finish my point, in the end, Ben Ford, last time around, 1.1 seconds faster than Daniel Thomas. I mean, we're ebbing and flowing like the tide at the moment at the front of the field. But the drier it gets, I think, the more it suits Ben Ford. Daniel Thomas, they will be hoping that it gets a little bit wetter again. But regardless for that, Ben Ford currently holds the fastest lap. Now, if Ben Ford can take keep the fast lap to the end of the race, P4 will win him the race. And with P5 in class currently being, I mean, a long way back, that's William Foyle 3 laps down. Yeah. All Ben Ford needs to do at the moment is just to keep it on the road.
Don't jinx him. Yeah, you know how potent the curse of the commentator is here, Dara. We've got to be careful.
I don't think I'd be forgiven for if something happened to Ben. But I think the point has to be that with what's going on, it does feel dramatic, it does feel quite intense, and he's not got the lead. But when you look at the bigger picture, everything looks relatively under control.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm keeping an eye on some of the gaps here. As we see Zed Murray down the inside of a couple. Oh, Zed Murray spinning in front of a couple of bits of traffic. Yeah, it's a well, that one's going to be a hard one to take, isn't it? You just sling it down the inside of some traffic, and then you loop it, and then you have to go and do it all again.
Yeah, it's because I think it's an occupational hazard at this point, isn't it? With some of the action that we're seeing.
There it is.
Yeah.
So yeah, curb strikes again, I suppose.
As we see a little bit more action between Ant Cassell's Andrew Medell as well. It's going to be interesting, I think, just to see how these guys can fight, because, of course, Ant Cassell's leading the championship coming into this race, currently has an 11-point lead in the live standings. Andrew Medell needs a win, realistically, to have any chance.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it's just turning out to be one of those races where we just don't know what's going to happen, because a win could potentially be on the cards here. Who knows at this stage? George Streetley has been very stable, actually, in the front of that LMP3 Pro category. It's not been the fastest, but he's kept, most importantly, kept himself out of trouble, like we're seeing in the background there through Vaux.
Yeah, and that's, I think, really been the mission of the day, is to keep yourself out of trouble. You do not want to get yourself caught up in any of the many incidents that we're seeing, and there's one in the background coming out of the final corner at Club, and I think just about keeping out of the wall, I think was one of the LMP3s, but just keeping the car under control couldn't have gained you so much time in positions rather than pushing for that little bit more as Craig Curtis did, and finding yourself losing 5 to 10 seconds by going around.
Yeah, keeps out of the wall though. Coming through towards the the pit wall, I suppose, coming through that section. It has started raining again though, so we did have a little bit of a break in the rain, but the precipitation is now back. But I don't think it's really going to be getting any more intense than it has been throughout this race. It's all sort of dark greens and blues on the weather radar at the moment. So decent rain, but not very intensive. If we started seeing yellows and reds, then that would be a bit more of a problem. But for right now, it's manageable conditions, especially if you just know how to keep yourself out of trouble.
Yeah, I think when I was driving home today, I think there was some yellow and reds on whatever radar.
Yeah, I mean, same.
Because it was torrential. Hopefully we don't get that, because I think that's kind of, red flag worthy conditions. Of course, I don't think iRacing will be throwing a red flag for it being too wet, but we don't want to see a position where the driver's just skating, and it's more like watching Dancing on Ice rather than the finale of the Abruzzi Prototype Championship. But these guys, they're doing such a good job. With 28 laps in, we've had this rain coming down for a good 10-15 laps now. Well, more like 10, I think. But they have managed with it really, really well. And a few of the drivers really showing their class. The likes of Daniel Thomas, the likes of Luca Munro, as Jamie Gibson still not happy with that rear end.
Yeah, it's just not settling down for him, is it? It's one of those tricky things to get right in the drive, because you're so used to accelerating at the same point coming out the corner in dry conditions constantly, right? It's almost like muscle memory, and now you're fighting against the muscle memory, which is really, really difficult to fight against. It's crazy stuff, and this is why, especially even in the real world, we get our wet weather specialists, right? Because we get some we see that in F1 all of the time, right? So because it does require this certain skill set. It's not like racing in the dry whatsoever. It's a different technique. It's a different style. And if your dry weather style doesn't convert easily into the wet weather running style, then you could potentially run into a couple of issues and then have big incidents as a result there. So that is a really, really, really important point to get across to viewers if they haven't driven in the wet before, especially on a simulator such as iRacing, which simulates it so well. Is that it's not just a dry track with low grip. It's more dynamic. We got standing waters at some parts of the circuit. We have a drying line. We have rubbered in parts, not rubbered in parts. We have bits of track that drain well, bits of track that don't drain well. And all of these are all this factored in, which is why iRacing has done such a good job with it. And I mean, it's just shown by the challenge that the drivers are having to deal with out there today, because this is not easy. I mean, some of these drivers are pretty good. They're not the best of the best. I will admit that, but they're pretty good. They are up in towards that 3,000-4,000 iRating range. Some of them, yes, we got a couple of 1,000s and 2,000s in there as well. But you see how much they're struggling with the conditions, and this is only a lightly wet track. You can only imagine what a more significant rain would do with this race. But just sort of recapping the events, of course, we've got the LMDh Pro order. That currently has Daniel Thomas at the very top of the order. He holds 12.6 seconds over Ben Ford, although that gap has been going in and out like a yo-yo as they try to find their footing around this racing circuit. Then you've got in LMDh AM, we have potentially, for a lot of people, a very surprising leader. It's Luca Munro by 14, almost 15 seconds over Oliver Ettridge, as we see this little grouping of cars try to duel out there. It's a sort of lapping procedure here at the moment in and amongst those. But back to LMDh AM, Luca Munro leads. So for someone who is so emotional getting a race win at Suzuka, he's currently in the driving seat, not only to win this race, but to also take the championship. How about that? Oliver Ettridge in second place, trying his level best to make sure that doesn't happen. Philip Carnell in P3 with Patrick N in P4 in LMDh AM. Then you've got your LMP3 Pros. So you've got George Streetley currently leading from Anthony Castle. So that's the situation there. I wonder if we can just get the live points of LMP3 Pro up on screen right now, just to try and see where the standings are with regards to that, because that's something I do want to talk about. So we got Ant Castle still leads the championship at this stage. So P2 is going to be more than enough for Ant Castles to take this one. Andrew Medell, he's currently stuck down in P3, so he really needs to get a move on. He really needs to be at least winning this race to actually have a chance at taking the championship away from Ant. So it'll be a very, very big ask. Not impossible, but a very big ask indeed. George Streetley, of course, potentially might end up scoring maximum for this race, because he's missed and had problems in so many races from before. He'll only remain in P3 if they finished as they are. Then you have a look down into LMP3 AM. So the situation here is, again, quite interesting, because the current overall leader in LMP3 is an AM driver. So that's Ethan Barford. He will win the championship if it finishes as it is right now. Aidan Carter in P2 in the race and in the championship. So that will be no change there. Francis Sikorsky, of course, has had a good couple of issues over the course of this race, and that actually has officially DNF'd and disconnected from the server. So Sikorsky's fate is sealed on 63 points. Cav Bud actually up 2 positions in the championship order if it finished now, up into 4th. In and amongst all of these different changeable conditions. But that's just sort of a recap of the situation in each of your 4 classes here, Dara. And I was also mentioning that there was different skill sets that are in play here when we talk about wet versus dry racing, where we have rain specialists in the real world. We might end up having rain specialists here in sim racing as well, as we do have a battle out there. It's Ash Hill versus Jamie Gibson. Gibson, of course, recovering from his instance earlier on.
Yeah, and I think a really good point to add to what you were saying a few laps ago about wet weather racing is that when rain falls and when it starts to dry, the track changes, minute by minute. You cannot necessarily rely on the same line lap after lap, because the track will never be the same. Each time you run over it, and a big slide there. Massive slide from Ash Hill coming out of the final corner. So part of the challenge for these drivers is to just adapt, change with the conditions, and kind of realise the reality of the circuit quickly, and try and change their driving style accordingly. And the drivers that can do that the quickest and the fastest will be the drivers that benefit the most from these kind of periods.
iRacing is now saying the track is moderately wet, as Gibson having a spin, and that's allowed Ash Hill through. That's up into P5 in LMDh AM. So Gibson's not having a fun time out there. No rain dancing happening, I suppose.
Yeah, no, I think, well, to be fair, I think he has been rain dancing, because the rear end of that car has been dancing around, but I don't think it's been the type of dancing he's necessarily wanted to be doing. But behind Ash Hill now, we'll see if he can try and get back through. A little battle that I've seen brewing, both on the timing screens and on the tower, Ethan Barford and Aidan Carter. There's now only 1 second between those 2 drivers, provisionally top 2 in the championship. Ethan Barford in the live standings has a 20-point lead over Aidan Carter. So Aidan would need quite a big swing, and Ethan Barford to fall further down, as Gibson again going around.
Ooh, that's a broken car.
Oh, yeah, that's very... I'm glad that's got off the racing line as well, because that could have been very dangerous.
Yeah, so things go from bad to worse when the 25 is he has to take the tow back to pit lane, and I think potentially that might just be the end of Jamie Gibson's race. Get out onto the curb and bang! Oof, big one. Right in towards the pit wall and spinning across the grass as well, holding the brakes to make sure he doesn't come back onto the circuit. That's fantastic to see. But yeah, that was a very, very big instance there. That takes Jamie Gibson out of this event. We do have a good handful of retirements, understandable given the conditions here at the moment. We've got Louis Hesketh, Vittorio Giantio, we've got Sikorsky, Noble, and Jan Shaw all out of the event at this stage. Dan Shaw actually was out basically lap 1, so wasn't affected by the weather there in that instance. But yeah, you are absolutely right with pointing out the battle though, Dara. Ethan Barford's lead not looking very secure at this point in time. Aidan Carter has been catching over the last couple of laps, seems to be a bit more comfortable with the conditions, and is really turning up the heat now.
Yeah, and for Aidan Carter, they've shown some really, really good flashes of brilliance this season. I mean, a win at Spa, really, at the start of the season, showing what Aiden can do, and another win here could bookend the season with some great performances. But for Ethan Barford, being, yeah, it's fair to say, slightly more consistent, 2 wins in the last 3 races puts him in the championship winning position at the moment. And Aiden, though, trying to do everything he can to make it a little bit more difficult for Ethan. But I mean, after these two, you've got these 1 and 2, it's a 50-second gap back to Cav Bud. So Aiden can win this race, but I'm going to need a massive error from Ethan Barford to take the title. But a win in the final race can still give you that kind of, you know, that pride, can't it? Especially with the extended race and the rain that we've had here today.
You can never say never in these sorts of races, can you? But with the current cards that we have on the table, Aiden Carter looking very, very good in these conditions. Has the wet weather seat speed, it seems, that Barford is struggling to try to match, and we'll have to see how this move potentially happens, where Aiden Carter is planning to put his car to try and get past here, because it's not going to be easy. Again, your strategy is going to change compared to when you're in the dry here, because again, the dynamics of the track are just so different. So, you know, where do you place that car? You can see the big line being taken from Barford around the outside, wanting to avoid that rubbered in line on the inside. But really, you're all through the loop. You kind of all funneled into one line there. So you have to be very, very, very careful, very tentative with getting on the power. And then you can open things up a little bit heading down the Wellington Straight. So we're seeing Patrick Den there in the LMDh car just head his way down the inside here. It might compromise Barford here just a little bit. On the outside, it's not a bad place to be, though, considering the situation. Sean McCardle was off on the side of the circuit there, having spun, and as also letting the rest of these cars through.
And Den taking one of the most extreme inside lines I think I've ever seen into that corner. Over there. He wasn't even on the screen, was he? I mean, lucky to get through the corner, but a lot of speed having to be taken off, it's fair to say, by the 998 car. But still running in P4. I think, though, for Patrick Den, maybe a little bit disappointed with how this race has gone. Of course, coming into this race, 3 points off Canel in the championship lead, and as it stands, 11 points off the championship lead, but down in P4 in the championship. Maybe would have wanted a little bit more, but I mean, if he can keep the car underneath him in relatively good condition and get a little bit of confidence in the lines he can take, you never know, he may be able to gain a few more spots with the time that we've still got, because we are, I mean, approaching the 2/3 mark, but still over 17 laps to go.
Yeah, absolutely, and you've got to start thinking now. Of course, the race has gotten slower, right, because of the conditions, so it'll take more time to complete 51 laps, which potentially might make, well, I mean, of course, the guessing and strategy is involved inside the pit stops potentially is a bit of a weird one, because people came down in at wildly different times. Some really tried to push through the rain, tried to stay on the slick tires as long as possible, one of them being Ben Ford, of course, who ended up losing a whole massive chunk of time as a result, and also lost the overall race lead. But there's some that did come down in slightly earlier. People like Sarah Dove came down in at one of the first opportunities. Oliver Ettridge came down in as well, same with Philip Connell and David Vey. So that's the situation there, which is actually really quite interesting, because now, with the fuel situation, stopping before the end of this race, it looks like, I mean, if you were to stop now, obviously wet tyres would be the correct choice. But what if the track dries out by the time the end of this race arrives? Are we going to have to go through another cycle with the fuel, with the tyres? Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be, yeah, this is going to be an interesting one, I think, in the last 10 laps, just to see which way it ends up going, frankly, because it's going to ebb, it's going to flow. We just don't know exactly which way it's going to go in terms of the strategy. Another thing I wanted to quickly mention was that looking at the timing page, of course, we're on lap 34, but Daniel Thomas is coming up to end lap 34 now, which leaves us 17 laps of this race. With us lapping at about the 1 minute 55 mark, give or take, we're looking at about 33 minutes to complete this race, and on the remaining clock in the session, 33 minutes and 20 seconds. So I think, unless we get a big downpour, this race could be timed beautifully well.
Yeah, it could be. I'm sort of just looking at the lap times right now. It's a good indicator of exactly how the track conditions are. the track conditions were particularly poor. I think I'm just trying to correlate this amongst multiple drivers. The track conditions were particularly poor, or at their worst, probably about 4 or 5 laps ago. It slowly started getting better since then as the rain has eased at some, well, stopped at some parts of the circuit. It is still coming down in drips and drabs elsewhere on the circuit, but at some parts of this track it has completely stopped. So now the track's getting a little bit faster. So the worst of it seems to be over, and at least on the radar we do have a bit of clear sky, I suppose, behind this current little bit of rain that we're having. So that might be arrive in time for the end of this race. It's just a matter of how dry does the track get, as Oliver Etridge has a big moment in the 57.
Yeah, and Oliver Etridge does not want to make any big mistakes, of course, with the position in the championship being he needs to win this race at the moment, or overtake Luca Munro at least, to take the title, so cannot afford any kind of misstep. But, oh, there's another driver running wide as well, off of the road. Shouldn't get in the way of Barford and Carter, but they continue on in first and second. Carter just not able to get that kind of bite into the gap that he, or that they need to on Ethan Barford, and with that gap sitting about 0.8 of a second running through Brooklands and Luffield now.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that's a big change there. And with the LMDh AM category, Luca Munro, he just needs to stay calm. He might not necessarily realize that he's in a championship winning position at the moment, and I think that's probably for the best. Because he just needs to stay calm and get this car to the end of this race, make the right call at the right time, just in case this weather eases enough that the dry line starts becoming competitive, and potentially we might look to go back onto slick tires. But for now, it's just gotta stay zen, stay calm. I mean, you can be a couple of tenths of a second slower per lap. That's fine at this point. You have enough of a buffer, and just get it home.
Because you don't want to be finding yourself in a position where, you know, you're facing the wall and thinking, I didn't need to, you know, push this hard. You just want to get the car to the end of the race. And especially if you're in Aiden Carter's position, obviously you want that title. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But when you've got Franciszek Sikorsky, you know, out of this race, the safety blanket that Aiden has got for P2 is I mean, the fact that he almost cannot be overtaken for P2. I think Cavbud can't even overtake Aiden Carter. So Aiden Carter has secured P2. The fact is, to win the championship, Ethan Barford has to go back a little bit further than P2, and that doesn't look likely. So if you're Aiden Carter, just getting the car home to the end and consolidating these points is really going to be the aim of the game, and maybe picking off a win for pride. But I think just finishing this race, especially with the length of it compared to the other race we've had this season, especially with the rain that we've had, making it even more of a challenge, finishing this race in a good position is going to be a fantastic feeling.
Yeah, even just getting to the end would be a fantastic feeling without too many issues. That's what I would argue for sure. But with the current state of play, Aiden Carter, again, as you've quite rightfully explained, would require a miracle for this to happen for him. But you know racing drivers, right? They want to go for a race win no matter what, no matter if it's going to win them a championship or not. They're just going to go for it, aren't they? As we see Daniel Thomas coming down in, so this is an important point. An extra stop. Presumably you still go on to the wets at this point. Track is definitely not dry enough for dries at this point. So you're just getting the fuel to the very end of the race now, and then potentially having to make a panic stop just in case it does clear up.
Yeah, because some drivers might need splash and dashes. That's something we've got to think about. I mean, Daniel Thomas is clearly covering that off. And thinking that I might as well come into the pit lane because I know I'm going to have to. Might as well do it now and get myself in to the end of the race with some confidence and some rhythm. And Ford remains to be seen what he's going to do. Might follow in Daniel Thomas, knowing that he just has to shadow the 60 car to win the championship. But that might be symptomatic of the fact that a lot of drivers might have to come into the pit lane before the end of the race. Daniel Thomas may have been close on the fuel number and thought, I'm not going to get there, might as well pit now, which means that drivers that pitted later might have a chance at getting to the end, but it's going to be difficult to say exactly who those drivers are going to be. Yeah,
it really is. So this is the potentially pretty tricky part of the race in terms of the strategy, because like I mentioned before, when the rain initially came, everyone came down at sometimes quite wildly different points. So so that obviously has affected the second portion of the race, because again, it came down before we could have had potentially a one-stop race window. So they're kind of forced into this two-stop scenario now. But the question is that, you know, exactly right, Dara, where, you know, how far do these drivers decide to push it? You know, because we could have seen that was maybe a safe option for Daniel Thomas to come down in, get the fuel to the end, and then worry about things further down the line, just knowing that you at least have the fuel for the end of the race. So that your fate there is sealed. It's just the unknown of the last potentially 10 to 14, 13 laps of this race now is really the most important thing. Yes, the championship is still pretty much sealed in the LMDh Pro category, but again, you still want to be competing for these wins.
You do, absolutely you do. But I mean, you're looking at the LMP3 battle as well. Jules Streetley, not in the championship battle, winning the race. Only driver in the field of the four categories to not be in the championship picture and be winning the race. Aiden Carter going wide, just about getting it back onto the road, but that did not look comfortable in the 42 car. I noticed as well, Ben Ford has stayed out. That gap to Daniel Thomas growing out quite quickly. 32.5, 0.6, 33.0, 33.1. It is really, I don't know what's happened to Daniel Thomas, maybe some kind of incident, but he is dropping away like a stone.
He is a bit, isn't he? So I'm just going to rewind to see exactly what happened. There was he did encounter a little bit of lap traffic here on his outlap, so that may have been an issue. But yeah, sort of maybe trying to stabilize out now. It did look a bit concerning there just for a moment, but yeah, potentially a bit of lost time. We'll see how this factors in once Ben Ford comes down on towards the pit lane.
Yeah, but for Ben Ford, I mean...
Oh, Thomas almost got taken out. Sorry.
What? No, that's fine. I mean, they're big moments for the championship.
Yeah, David Vey having a big issue, I think it was. Well, here's a replay with Sarah Dove, actually. So Dove having a bit of a spin. But then there was almost a catastrophic moment with Daniel Thomas, which meant that potentially he could have just not been in contention of the race win, because David Vey coming back across the circuit after having a massive moment. Monroe in. Luca Monroe is in.
Yeah, and that means that Ettridge, now back in the lead, is now back in provisional championship winning position. Remains to be seen whether Ettridge has to come back in. Question about maybe dry tyres. Is there any much more rain on the radar? Because if it looks like it might be dry to the end of the race, the track will be getting a little bit dry. I think probably a little bit premature for dry tyres. Probably just an additional bit of fuel for the car. But with Ettridge now leading, Munro down to third, Ettridge now is in a championship winning position as things stand.
Yeah, so with the radar right now, this is our first more considerable break in the rain, let's just say that. We've had mini breaks before, but this is potentially going to be a bit of a larger gap looking on the radar here at the moment. Whether or not it's enough for the track to dry by the end of this race, or whether or not the race will even return for the last couple of laps, that still remains to be seen. But the track is going to get faster and faster. Track conditions are going to get a bit easier and easier as these laps tick by, as the sun shines down onto the circuit and that water evaporates away. But you know, all bets are off at this point with regards to, you know, how fast this track dries, because even that's a massive variable. That depends on the humidity. It depends on the wind speed, the temperature, how many cars are running on the lines as well. So you can't really get a concrete figure, even if you've tested with it.
Oh, and that's Ethan Barford slipping and sliding his way into the Vale chicane. Through goes Aiden Carter. Aiden Carter into the lead now at Silverstone. Wouldn't be enough to take the championship, but that gap now in the live standings is down from what was 18 points. Down from 20 points to 6. So that is a big old swing. You can see it up on the top right hand side of your screen. That has closed significantly, but Aiden Carter needs Ethan Barfoot to fall further away, and Cav Bud and Sofiero went over a minute behind, not looking terribly likely. But that's the championship battle that has changed, like we've seen in the LMDh AMs, as that's, I think that's going wide. That's one of the LMDh AMs who is that?
Ash Hill?
It's the Ash Hill, that's it, thank you. Ash Hill going off, and another lazy spin, but we are seeing some big old moments in the championship as the championship pictures are rapidly changing before our eyes.
Yeah, they absolutely are. Track was moderately wet for a moment. It's gone back to lightly wet, so that's at least iRacing's assessment of the situation. We have 11 laps to go here, though, at this point, so who knows what might happen at the very end of this race. Daniel Thomas has obviously already come down towards the pit lane for potentially his final stop, his final fuel stop, at least. We'll have to see whether or not it's the actual final stop. Of course, with LMDh AM, Luca Monroe has decided that he wants to come down in, keep the wet tires and get the fuel to the end of the race as well, which is probably a smart decision. He does have a bit of a buffer in terms of a lead there that he could potentially work with if Oliver Ettridge does come down in as well for his final stop for the fuel. But with the situations elsewhere, yeah, you're going to have to do your own calculations, because this has been an absolutely crazy race with a lot of factors playing into this. But that's why we love racing, right? It can be a little bit unpredictable sometimes, and that's what makes it fun.
Exactly. Just like the unpredictability of Ben Ford coming into the pit lane now. I mean, how does this change the face of the race? Daniel Thomas 34 seconds behind before Ben Ford pits. How much will that change? We will see how long the stop is for Ben Ford. You'd think minimal fuel needed to go into the car, if any. Maybe just a change of tyres. Let's see, up onto the jacks. It doesn't seem like there are any wheels being changed, so maybe just a top-up of the fuel. But this pit stop needs to be a little bit shorter if he wants to get out in the lead. I think he'll probably come out in second, but again, that should be okay for his championship.
Yeah, Dan Thomas, 10 seconds on the relative now, 8 seconds as Ben Ford's still stationary on the pit lane, down off the jacks. 23.5 seconds is the gap. What's the gap going to be coming off for the pit lane, though? That's the big question. I think Ben Ford might just be getting himself out ahead here, and he has just about straight into a side-by-side moment with Medell in the LMP3, but Ben Ford out ahead, but he's not settled. That car's squirreling around a little bit. Tyres struggling at this point, and well, we'll have to see if that gets a little bit better once he puts a couple of laps on, but that car not looking stable at all. Daniel Thomas will have a decent run coming down the Wellington straight here, potentially to make a little bit of a move into the braking zone. He does go for it. Does Dan Thomas? He has to be careful to try and get that car stopped and stable on that rubbered-in line. Dan Thomas back to the overall race lead.
Yeah, but sadly, they're not back to the overall championship lead. Good move from Daniel Thomas, though, to the inside. Ben Ford, maybe the tyres, if he did change them, a little bit cold. He has to get them up to temperature in these wet conditions, because it didn't look like the most comfortable of sectors, was it, through Sector 1? Going wide, though, in front of Daniel Thomas. That'll be pleasing for him. I think that was George Streetley. It was, because Ant Cassels has gone into the lead, and that now means that Ant Cassels has an 18-point lead at the top of the LMP3 Pro Championship as things stand, which could be oh so important for him. But you know what? We've had 41 laps. We've got the leading battle of the two fastest drivers in the entire Abruzzi Prototype Championship this season, only 2 seconds apart, and yet we have still got 10 more laps, Connery, to decide all of the championships.
Yeah, we absolutely do. This is kind of what, well, partially what we hoped for coming into the day. Here's George Streetley coming through Cops Corner. Such a fast portion of the track, has to push all the way wide. Thankfully able to keep the car together and rejoin the circuit, unlike the car behind. Yeah, I guess 2 examples of how to deal with the same situation there.
Yeah, that could have been Rocco Valentino, possibly in that car. Looked like a bit of an Italian flag livery, as I think that's Valentino in the foreground of the shot there, which would back up that point. Valentino, I know you mentioned earlier that he had retired from the race. He did for a time, but I think he was just repairing the car. Back out on track, as he has been for quite a while, and he's recovered to P5, which is still his championship position at the moment. So we've still got the top 5 in the championship, in the top 5 in the race, and actually, I'm going to double check this right now, but as things stand, if it were to finish exactly like this, in the hypercar, the LMDh AM category, Ettridge, Canal, Monroe, Den, Valentino is the race finishing order, and it would also be the championship finishing order.
How about that? Interesting times here in the finale. The Silverstone 300 kilometers in the Abruzzi Prototype Challenge. Of course, we'll end our 3 championships here. No matter what, once 51 laps have expired. It's all about the configuration of the drivers coming across the line. So we're getting to that point now. We're see the light at the end of the tunnel when it comes towards the end of the season. I've just been seeing Ben Ford drop off the back of Daniel Thomas here. He's been really struggling for the rear end grip in that car, it seems. So unable to keep with the wet weather pace of Dan Thomas. So it's interesting to see the big differences here, Dara, because in the dry, Ben Ford was, you know, not untouchable, but certainly had a big advantage over everyone else. But as soon as the conditions changed, Dan Thomas is right there. Yeah,
it was safe, wasn't it, really, for Ben Ford? It wasn't, I mean, he wasn't running away from the rest of the field. I think the gap was about 5-6 seconds, but he had it under control. Daniel Thomas read the conditions perfectly and got himself into that lead and really pulled away at the start of that stint. I remember mentioning one lap was 3 seconds of a gain. As we're also very quickly seeing Luca Monroe going to the lead in LMDh AM. He's overtaking Oliver Ettridge. I don't know how that's happened. I think maybe there was a couple of pit stops there, but Monroe back to the lead, which puts him back into the championship winning position again.
And Oliver Ettridge struggling with a bit of traffic there. As that was Dan Thomas actually heading his way through. But Monroe's lead is only 2.3 seconds, so that's a considerable loss. Of course, you kind of had to take the safe option there if you're Luca, but those in-laps from Ettridge were fantastic, and a little bit of confusion in and amongst the lapping procedure here as Ettridge makes his way around the outside of Patrick Den, who is very much struggling. Den's on the dry tires. Am I seeing that right on the timing?
I think you could be. Is
that why he's struggling so much?
Very well.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that would make sense, wouldn't it? Yeah.
He's gone. On my screen, he's gone straight on that cop. So yeah, it's that's not the gamble that I think was warranted at this stage.
No.
Yeah, you see on the replay.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, car doesn't want to turn.
Yeah. Russia 2021 scenes there from Patrick Den. It's a shame, of course, for the 998 car, but Den, in the second half of this race, just been running around in P4 or so. At the moment, running ahead of, we're now behind Rocco Valentino, as Rocco Valentino has now got through for P4, so recovering there for now. Den realistically out of contention now. Disappointing for him, but it would have taken him, I think, needing to overtake Luca Monroe to win this race, to win the championship, I should say, and that could have mean winning the race. So it would have been difficult anyway, and now almost impossible realistically. But I think another thing I can try and work out in a second, Connery, is the fastest lap points, because we shouldn't be getting any faster laps in these wet conditions.
I'd be very surprised if that were to happen. Actually, Patrick Den's coming down on towards the pit lane now, so he's decided his one-lap excursion, his one-lap test on the dry tyres has not worked. So he's coming back down in and getting those slicks off, because they are not appropriate for the conditions as they are at the moment. Yes, it hasn't been raining for a while, but the track is still not dry, or it doesn't even have a fully dry line just yet. So that's the situation here. That's good information, actually, for a lot of the drivers out there, Dara, because obviously you can talk in hypotheticals, right? You know, how would dry tyres deal with this current situation? But as soon as you see the proof in the pudding, someone trying it, you don't actually know for sure, do you?
Oh, not at all. You haven't got a clue. But yeah, it's good to see. It's nice to see that someone's tried it, or rolled the dice and gone for it. It's just a shame that it hasn't worked out, because it would have been quite nice to see. That kind of strategy working. Someone was off the track wide at Cop's corner. Not too sure who it was, but someone was facing the wrong way and not on the preferred racing line and going the preferred racing speed around that corner. But we'll hope that they can recover the car. But yeah, we are really counting down the laps now, and really the chances are running out for a couple of these guys, namely Andrew Medell, who still could win this championship from the position that he's in, but it's going to take quite a bit, and positions are going to have to be made soon by him if he's going to do it.
Yeah, and those are not going to be easy positions made either, because it's what, George Streetley at 4.6 seconds down the road, then Ant Castles is another second down the road from there in terms of that the LMP3 Pro category. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of hard work from this point, and maybe even a little bit of luck for Andrew Medell's. But for him to win the championship. But right now it is Ant Castles in the driving seat there. In your other championships, if the race were to finish as it is right now, as you see a little bit of a battle going on the circuits there, it's, sorry, just recapping the battles. So Ben Ford's, of course, LMDh Pro Championship winner at the moment. We've got Luca Monroe, LMDh AM Championship winner at the moment. That will be only beef by 4 points, by the way. Then you've got in LMP3 Pro, Ant Castles winning by 18 points, and Ethan Barford in LMP3 AM winning by 5 points as well. So that's the situation in each of your championships into these very dying moments.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy the fact that we've got 3 of the championships still at the moment split by 7 points or less for the championship lead. It's crazy when that amount of points is the swing for, 14 points is the swing for first and second. But yeah, I mean, it's crazy. Barford is in, but has a very, very big gap back to P3 in class, who is Cav Bud. And even if he was to lose the position for P3, he would still be in a championship winning position. Surely not Dries. Surely
not Dries. Like,
wouldn't make that kind of risk.
Yeah, Barford's one has been glitched in terms of my timing as to exactly what tyre he's on for the last while. So I would just hold the horses just a little bit before we make that call. But yeah, I didn't see it change to wet because it's been stuck on dry for a while. But I didn't see it change to wet once he come off the pit lane. So we'll have to see what happens there. It would be a very weird decision if it was to go onto the slick tyres at this stage, surely. But because it is starting to rain again, so that dry spell is pretty much now over, and the track's just going to get wetter and wetter. So it looks like he's okay though. I haven't seen any big moments for him out on his outlaps, so it looks like he's okay at the moment. It's just that at least my timing screen is a bit balked.
And I think fittingly, the dying embers of the season are going to be almost washed out by the rain, aren't they? In that kind of way.
Oh, change release lead.
Yeah, George Greedy going to get through on Ant Castles, I should say, as they make their way through Maggots and Beckett's now. But again, shouldn't worry Ant Castles too much, because if George Streetley wins this race, he should win the title. But that gap has now come down from an 18-point gap to an 11-point gap at the moment. And if Andrew Medell can overtake Ant Castles, that becomes 5. So I don't think he'll want to risk anything now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's between the two. I mean, they are teammates, so it'll be a bit of an interesting. Sorry, I'm talking about a completely different situation there. I was saying Ethan Barford and Anthony Castles were teammates, but of course they're in different categories and they were very close out there on circuit. Anyway, so disregard that. And Castles down on towards the pit lane. However, as Andrew Medell has also decided that now is a good time to come down in as well. So they're going to get themselves stopped in their pit boxes. Is there a mistake there from Ant Castles? Was there a slight reverse? There was a slight reverse from from the other LP3 there. So it looks like struggling to get yourself stopped for your pit boxes, which is actually understandable considering the conditions, as you see Andrew Medell getting himself out and trundling down towards the end of the pit lane, first out of this group.
Yeah, and that means that Medell is going to be ahead of Cassels as they make their way out of the pit lane, which does then mean that that gap is now down to just the 5 points, meaning that in the live championship, positions as Den gets hit. Every single championship is currently being won by 7 points or less. Ben Ford is somehow has the most comfortable championship advantage. That's Ettridge.
It is Ettridge. Monroe has the breathing space now. He has the breathing space for the LMDh AM lead and potentially the championship as well. Gap stands at 4.5 seconds between the two in that category. So as the rain returns here in the 300 kilometers of Silverstone, more and more drama starts to happen. Things get closer in the LMP3s. Things maybe get a bit further away in LMDh AM. That's how things can change at this late stage as Castle's out wide. Oh my word, Mansfield as well further down the road. It's getting tricky out there again.
I don't know what noise I just made, I'll be honest, but it was just quite a scary moment down through Brooklands and Luffield, because Luca Monroe in a championship-winning position, but only by 4.5 seconds, nearly getting tangled up with some of the LMP3s around him. Reminder, Monroe and Ettridge, realistically, whoever wins the race out of the two of them wins the championship. If they come together, Philip Cannell could walk through and win the championship, but at the moment, unless something bad, really bad happens between Monroe and Ettridge, whoever finishes ahead of the other will be the title winner. I mean, this is really coming down to the wire. There are 4 laps to go at the end of this one. Ant Cassels loses the position to James King, which means that the gap is now down to 2 points. But Andrew Medell, therefore, needs to overtake George Streetley. But Streetley's in the pit lane.
Streetley's in the pit lane.
Well.
Oh my word, yeah, we were due for a stop. They don't have the fuel till the end of the race, so we have to see how this all shakes up. You can see the live points on the right-hand side of the screen there. Ant Castle's leading by just 2 points at this stage, but where does Streetley come out? Andrew Medell down on towards the pit lane as well.
Yeah, I think James King could be involved here now, who wasn't really involved in the battle at all. Yeah. Relatively safe for P4, but now, depending on whether James King can get to the end of the race, might find himself involved in a title battle. Through goes King. I think through goes Cassels as well. It's going to be very touch and go between those two as they come off of the pit lane. Actually, I think Medell's got it by a couple of seconds. But oh my word, this is changing around like there's no tomorrow, and there's 3 laps left.
Yeah, absolutely. This might be one of the most chaotic 3 laps that you'll see with the track conditions. Cassels on my screen, he's losing a lot of time. So what has happened here? Because he's just falling further and further back. And if he drops back into the clutches of Cav Bud, that could be it. He's still off the road, by the way.
Cav Bud's in the AM category, though. That's the saving grace for Ant Cassels, because there's only 4 cars in the category, so he can only he can get 12 points at worst if he crosses the line. The problem for Andrew Medell is that means that he has to win the race. There is no 2 ways about it, and he's currently 24 seconds off it. Remains to be seen if George Streetley's already been in, so he has to overtake George Streetley. James King might have to come in, but that doesn't matter because he has to get through Streetley. I mean, this is mental now, isn't it?
Yeah, so there's the struggles of Castles, and actually on the live pictures he's struggling more. Yeah, this is not a good situation. He's on the dry tires. It looks again this is the one situation where I don't think the timing screen is deceiving me, because he's struggling so much. He must be on the dry tires, and that's what my timing screen's saying.
That would make sense as well, but I think at this point Cassels just has to, grin and bear it, because he just has to get the car to the end of the race. That is all he needs to do. Yeah, I mean, he just needs to stay on the road. That's even though he's on the dry tyre, let everybody pass if he needs to. Get that car to the checkered flag as quickly or as slowly as you see fit. But I mean, we're on lap 49 of 51 now. He's just hoping that Daniel Thomas gets through this race as quickly as possible, or maybe even Ben Ford, because there's only 2.9 seconds between those guys at the lead of that race, as there's now a reduced gap of now under 4 seconds between Monroe and Ettridge.
Yeah, absolutely. So things are starting to come together here as you see the onboard with Ant Cassels. This is what it's like to drive on even a slightly wet track. No grip, no grip whatsoever through Stowe Corner, and as soon as you get into that standing water or that more wet part of the circuit with the dry tyres, it's just not going to work. And actually, he decides to just commit to it. He doesn't even come down in again. He's just going to commit to it. I mean, he could. He's in last place. There's not many more points to lose. So you can come down and get wet tyres on and save the DNF and save your pride as he spins right into the racing line.
Thankfully not collected by anybody. I mean, Ant Cassels is just on survival mode here. He's likely to be lapped by probably George Streetley and James King, depending on how much time he continues to lose, but it just doesn't matter if he can get to the end of the race here. I mean, if... He could come into the pit lane, put on some wet tyres and make sure he gets to the end, but staying out and just bearing it for the time being, Daniel Thomas should be crossing the line in the near future to get us onto lap number 50, which means that Ant Cassel should only have to do 2 more laps, but this is just painful, isn't it?
We'll be waiting 15 years for him to come across the line to win his championship if the maths works out for him and Medel doesn't gain the position here. It's all very, very sketchy, isn't it? It's not very pretty viewing at this point.
It's not, I have to be honest, I sound like I'm preparing for Halloween with some of the noises I'm making. I do apologise, but it is just really quite nervy. I mean, we're seeing some such slow spins, some slow moments because of the rain. These aren't, you know, flashbang happening really fast. These are things that you can see coming, and the drivers are trying to avoid them, but sometimes the grip is just not there and they're walking themselves into it. But Ant Cassels walking around this Silverstone circuit, he might as well be on a push bike right now because that car is not moving at any rate of knots. And there is Dan Thomas to maybe put Ant Cassels out of his misery a little bit because it'll reduce the amount of laps that Ant has to do.
Yeah, it would. And obviously, if he can, you know, try and keep as close behind as Dan Thomas as possible, which is not likely. He'll Dan Thomas will come across the line to win, and then he can come across the line in behind, and then out of his misery quickly. But yeah, that's the situation. There's the overall race lead. Dan Thomas, number 60 car. What a performance in the wet conditions, in the changeable conditions at times as well, to be able to have the performance over Ben Ford, but unfortunately, right now, it wasn't to be for Dan Thomas. He put his best foot forward. Go on.
Oh, Munro and Ettridge, that gap reduced by 1.5 seconds when I looked at it. It's now 2 seconds, 1.6. Ettridge is gaining on Munro. Reminder, of course, that whoever comes out in front of that wins the championship. They're going to have 1 more lap to go at the end of this one, and Ettridge is gaining time hand over fist. Last time around, Ettridge gained 1.2 seconds. This time around, likely to be slightly more.
Ben Ford in. Ben Ford in for the end of this race. So that is a very, very interesting predicament. They have quite a buffer over those behind. So it's not a championship losing situation here for Ben Ford, but just coming down in, just making 100% sure that he can get to the end of the race. Although I was just double checking the instant limit, but it seems like it was not a black flag. Oh, Oliver Ettridge. Oh, I just saw that in my own view. Oh, it was looking like a closing gap there for Ettridge to try and make this championship run happen at the very end, but just had a bit of a moment in these wet conditions, and that gap is now up to 5.5.
Yeah, he had gained 1.6 seconds on the last lap, and the gap was 1.4. He was in range, and Oliver Ettridge just making the error at turn 1. I mean, he's going to be furious with himself, I'm sure, because the championship was on. It seemed like it was possible for him. He's still gaining time despite that spin, but he's just going to be, it's gutting for him realistically because of the chance he had. He probably didn't feel like he had a sniff, and then 2 laps of gaining means that he had the chance, but the spin at turn 1's going to cost him the championship. And gutting for him.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, at this stage, we get the confirmation in the top left of your screen that this is the final lap. For some drivers, it will be a very welcome sight. For others, maybe they would have wanted a couple of extra laps to try and make their positions happening. But for Daniel Thomas, it's not going to be the championship win. However, what it will be is a win in the final race of the season, perhaps in the most difficult race of the season. Not only longer, but under such conditions, Daniel Thomas comes across the line for the LMDh Pro category and takes the race win. But, of course, you've got your other races, your other championships to talk about. There is Ben Ford. What a performance it has been throughout this season. A bit of a slow start in terms of race wins, but got those P2s and those points in the bag constantly as well. But for him, it has been a fantastic performance still. Yes, he didn't have the speed in the wet, but in the dry, he certainly was one of the best. But there is Luca Monroe coming through, and Luca Monroe is going to take the race win in LMDh AM and also take the championship by 5 points out of complete nowhere. Coming into the final 2 races of this season, Luca Monroe is able to pull off the double win and get it done. There is Aiden Carter coming across the line. Not the championship for him. It's the championship in LMP3 AM to Ethan Barford. Fantastic performance indeed, finishing top 2 in this final race of the season. There is Ben Ford, however, taking the LMDh Pro Championship. Absolutely fantastic stuff. Well done to all of your drivers out there. Of course, and Castles has come across the line as well to take the race win, not the race win, excuse me, the championship win for Ant Castles in LMP3 Pro in a bit of an embarrassing fashion, let's just say at the very end. But all's well that ends well. At the end, it's the numbers that don't lie, and Ant Castles has taken the championship in LMP3 Pro.
I mean, what a race. I mean, 300 kilometers to Silverstone. Delivered, didn't it? I mean, what a race to have 4 championships decided, and with the biggest winning margin in any of those championships being 7 points for LMDh Pro, 4 in LMDh AM, 5 in LMP3 Pro, and 5 in LMP3 AM. A great season, 4 great championships, and yeah, great to have this race end in the manner that it did. I was also going to very quickly mention, Connery, when you mentioned the time clock counting down an hour and 6 minutes ago, I was watching as you were talking Daniel Thomas across the line. He crossed the line as that timer hit 0 precisely. So I have to say, you nailed it at the time, whether you knew it or not.
Well, what can I say? What can I say? I wish it was all planned and intentional, but a bit of a fluke. But let's have a look at the final order. These are the unofficial order, by the way, because the stewards have a lot of work to do, if I'm completely honest, figuring out who's at fault for some of these incidents. But we had a lot of self-spins and a lot of solo car incidents, so it might end up not mattering. But with the information that we have, Daniel Thomas taking the race win here by 53 seconds in the end over Ben Ford. But that's because Ben Ford made a late race stop just to make doubly sure he was able to get to the very end. Sarah Dove comes away with a podium in the final race of the season. David Vey P4, William Foyle P5, Salvatore Garantio in P6, and Dan Shaw P7. In LMDh AM, it looks a little bit like this. Luca Monroe, 4 points, rounding it up, 7 seconds to Oliver Ettridge. Ettridge had a big charge, a big moment, potentially chance to take the championship win at the very late moments, but however, it wasn't to be. A bit of a slide through the puddles, and he ends up almost 5 seconds behind. Then you've got Philip Cannell in P3 with Rocco Valentino P4, Ash Hill P5, Jamie Gilson P6, Patrick Den P7, Sean McCardle P8, Zed Murray 9th, and Cody Richards in 10th. Louis Hesketh will round out the 11-car order there. In LMP3 Pro, there were 4 of them, and well, I think if you're Ant Castles, you're so fortunate that there are only 4 of them, considering how his race went. He does take the championship win in LMP3 Pro, but it was George Streetley taking the race win. Then you got James King in P2, Andrew Medell P3, and of course Castles in 4th. Then you've got to the LMP3 AM. Aiden Carter takes the race win there. The championship winner, Ethan Barford, in 2nd place. Cav Budd in P3 with Sophie Aaron went P4. Michael Mansfield P5. Stuart Rice P6. Craig Curtis 7th. Bella Lusman 8th. Francis Sikorsky 9th. And Linda Noble in 10th. So there we go. It's all done as far as we're concerned here in the Abruzzi Prototype Challenge. We have our champions, and we just potentially, well, they'll gather their thoughts and potentially come and join us here in the commentary booth. But what a race, Dara! That was at some points there. I was just we could just throw all the plans out of the window because no one knew what was going on.
No, the championships ebbed, they flowed. I mean, there was drama. The rain produced, I mean, spins. It produced incidents. It produced big old crashes. We saw one coming out of Woodcut, I remember. That was quite a big one. Rocco Valentino was out of the race, recovered to P5 in the end. I mean, we had Luca Monroe winning again, meaning that coming from 4th to 1st in the championship in the race. Ben Ford holding on to win the title. Ant Cassell's more than holding on to win that title. I mean, what a season it's been. 5 races. Quite frankly, has not been long enough because we have seen such great racing.
Yeah, absolutely. As we wait for the drivers to come down in, I think I'm going to take a deep breath and we're going to have to do this because this one might be emotional. So if you have some tissues at home, you probably want to break them out. But we'll bring Luca Monroe up into the commentary booth because our LMDh Pro winner has not turned up yet. But Luca, race win in LMDh AM, and guess what? Championship as well. What happened?
Oh man, I can't believe it. I was amazed by how I managed to dodge everyone on that first lap. There was so much carnage, and I felt like I was almost like, you know, Moses parting the Red Sea. And I got up behind Rocco and Ollie, and I thought I'll just stick with these guys for now. And then when it was started to rain, we were all panicking. But I was on my fuel strategy plan, and so I managed to, because I was going to short fuel anyway, and so I got ahead of Ollie, and then Ollie just kept spinning. And look, I don't want to sound like I'm being a bit of a smug winner here. I just want to say thank you so much to Motorsport UK Esports for hosting this series. Obviously this championship wouldn't mean anything without the competition, you know. So Oliver, Philippe, Patrick, my teammate. This has been an absolute roller coaster, and I feel so privileged to call myself the champion.
It was a heck of a way to do it, wasn't it? With the chaos at the start, with the weather coming in for the first time this season, you had your work cut out there. But I mean, you can claim potentially all the things fell in your favor. You know, maybe a bit of luck with the timing, whatever, right? But in the end, you had to execute that. You had to withstand the pressure from Oliver Ettridge at the end there when he was closing you down. So credit where credit's due. That was a crazy drive, and you know, by the end of Road America, or rather start of Suzuka, you know, we were looking at this as a dream, but your dream's happening, mate.
This is literally a dream come true. I just want to forgive me for the bit of the. Oh, sorry, a friend of mine was watching and he's just messaged me. Sorry, where was I? So after Road America, I was completely down with myself. And obviously Suzuka was a great elation, and I was just happy to have a win. And then I saw the point situation. I was like, oh, if I win. Like, here's the thing, right? Even though I write for Overtake, I haven't actually been involved in PC Sim Racer for that long, and and only until 6 weeks ago I won my first ever league championship in the Motorsport UK Esports recommended community, Next Gen Racing, also in the Cadillac. And now to say that I've won 2 in the span of a month and a half. I can't believe it's a dream come true. You have no idea how happy I am.
I mean, I can tell. I can tell. I think everyone at home can tell as well. But I'll just throw it over to Dara for a bit, because Dara might want to have some input here, because obviously it's just been a crazy season, and I just want to see his input.
I was going to ask very quickly, Luca, just one very quick question. Obviously, 2 wins in the last 2 weeks. You've got you took 26 points in weeks 1 through 3, and then 50 in 4 through 5. I mean, how are going on to the last lap as well? Because obviously Oliver was catching you.
Yeah.
How were the emotions? I mean, was it? I'm guessing you had some stress.
Well, you will have seen. I don't know if you saw me just squeezing my way past an LMP3. That's a friend of mine, Aidan Carter, and thankfully he wasn't miffed at all. I tried to play as safe as possible, but I knew that I was a bit slow through Stowe, I think, the long sweeping right-hander before the pit entry, and I saw Ollie catching me. And then literally a few corners later, I thought I was toast, and then I just see on my relative only just dropping back. I was like, "Ah, okay," and I just had to keep my head down and get to the end. And yeah, it's such a turnaround. This series is a great metaphor for how I have really seen myself in sim racing as a whole. I just let myself get so incredibly worked up and down, and then it was the same thing in the next gen league. I won my first race, and then I went on a massive run, winning all but one of the remaining races, and come away with the championship. And there it was a bit more straightforward. I didn't have to steal a certain position in order to win it. But here I did, and there's no better way to do it. I'm so happy.
We'll go and let you enjoy it and just savor the moments. But yeah, absolutely. Luca Monroe, not only race winner here at Silverstone, championship winner in the LMDh AM as well. You can see the elation, but yeah, we do have to move on to another driver. Oh, it's such a joy. But we will get to speak to our LMDh Pro championship winner. I'll bring Ben Ford up into here, and Dara, you're standing by with Ben.
Yeah, I mean, Ben, championship winner, you didn't quite get the win today, but over the course of the season, if I'm not heavily mistaken, 2 wins, 3 second places. I mean, what a championship. You must be thrilled.
Yeah, shame about today, but it is what it is. I made a mistake on the not pitting on the lap before when Daniel did the first stop. But other than that, didn't drive too bad. Just played it very safe because I knew I just needed a podium and I've been fine. But I'm very happy with the whole season, to be honest. I didn't expect to not finish outside the top 2, but yeah, I'm happy to win, obviously.
And I mean, obviously, with the start of the season, you had a couple of second places that you thought could have been wins. You fought it back with 2 wins in a row, and to get another second place here, even though it's not necessarily the result you wanted, I mean, your consistency has been incredible.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I just do. I try to do it over every season. I just try to minimise damages if it doesn't go great, or just don't overdo it, basically, because if I overdo it, it's more chance of it going wrong. So yeah, but I had pace when I needed it, so that's what basically won me out, I think. Especially Suzuka, I think, was a big one.
That's what you need, isn't it, for a championship? I'll throw it over to you, Connery, if you've got anything quick to ask Ben, because I think outside... Oh, no, actually, no, I am right in saying this. Most points for any driver in any class this season.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a solid performance throughout the season. It took 3 races to get the win on the board, I suppose, but you know, the P2s before were still a very, very big help in that sort of consistency for the championship. Ben, so what is next for you, actually? Because you know, that's a normal thing I ask for a lot of drivers at the end of these seasons. What are you up to next? Because are we going to see you again on a RaceSpot broadcast at some point again in the near future, or are you going to sort of just chill for a moment and then come back with a vengeance?
I don't know. It just depends what's out there. If it's a championship I like the look of and a car that I like this, basically, I'll definitely be doing it. I don't really take breaks, really. So just whatever happens.
All right. Thank you very much. I'll let you go to enjoy your championship and the rest of your evening. But yeah, fantastic work out there today.
Thank you.
All right, that was Ben Ford, LMDh Pro Championship winner. We can have a look a little bit further in towards the LMP3 order now, and we can have a little bit of a chat to Ant Cass. Is Ant Castles there? No, I don't see an Ant Castles, but what I do see is potentially Ethan Barford. So we can bring Barford up into the commentary booth now. Ethan, how does LMP3 AM champion sound? Oh, he's gone already. He went back down to the interview channel. Ethan, you can't run away from me that quickly, mate. As you are the LMP3 AM champion. How does that sound?
Hello.
Or,
yeah.
Oh, there we go.
Is just... Hello. Yeah, champion is insane to me.
Yeah, and like for every other driver out there, it was a very, very challenging race with the wet conditions, which is the first time we've had that over the course of this season. First of all, have you done a lot of wet running in this car before? And two, how did you find the conditions out there? Because at times it looked treacherous when the rain was coming down.
Before this race, I'd never driven in the wet in this car. Before this championship, I'd never even driven the car at all. So it was definitely a big learning curve for me. But the race, it was intense. I mean, Aiden was rapid in the wet. Like, I just had no answer for that. He caught up so much. I was under so much pressure.
Yeah, it was crazy stuff out there. We had so many drivers just struggle to keep it on the track, let alone to go fast with trying out wet lines and things like that. So when you first saw the forecast, what were your thoughts? And then when that rain finally did hit, did the heart rate rise a little? What was the feelings?
My heart definitely was racing. I mean, I was scared. Like when it went down to like 0% just before the race, I was so happy that it wasn't going to rain. And then I saw it creep back up to 100, and I was like, oh, this is not going to end well for me. Thankfully, I survived. I had to be so careful though.
And that pretty much sums it up, right? For a lot of drivers, it was just a race for survival out there, and you did come home in a position where you could take the race win over Aiden Carter, and obviously Sikorsky was in the running as well, but he had issues here today as well. So I'll let you get back to what you were doing this evening and enjoy winning the championship, and hopefully we'll see you on our screens again soon, because it does seem like you have a decent amount of base behind that MP3.
Yes, thank you so much. I'll definitely be back, 100%, and I'll leave now and enjoy the championship. Thank you.
All right, fantastic to hear from you, Ethan. That was Ethan Barford there, 26 LMP3, the AM category winner there. So we do have one more championship winner to talk to, Dara, and that is going to be Ant Cassell. So we'll bring Ant Cassell in, and Mr. Thacker, take it away.
Yeah, and welcome in. I mean, let's just put aside the end of the race for a moment. Let's put it aside. Let's forget it happened. Champion, LMP3 Pro champion. I mean, over the course of the 5 weeks, you have been the best driver we have seen in your class. That must be fantastic to feel.
I think I'm still trying to gather myself, to be honest. There's going to be a bit of a review afterwards as well of what I could have done better, how we could have dealt with that situation a little bit better. I still haven't worked out the iRacing weather system.
But hey, I mean, even if you didn't quite get it right, over the course of the first 4 weeks, you got it right enough that it didn't really matter what happened in the end. 95 points in 5 rounds, 2 wins as well. I mean, overall, you've just had a great year, haven't you? Or a great year, great season, haven't you?
Yeah, I think I've grown into the car a little bit. Having George, their teammate as well, we've been doing a bit of practice together. It always helps. Learning the car together. I will carry on probably in a series in this car. It's been really enjoyable, and to find the pace in the last couple of weeks is, well, obviously helped my point situation, because the first 2 weeks I really struggled to control the car under braking. So it's good to finally finish this season.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, champion. Congratulations on doing so. I'll pass you over to Connery, because Connery, I don't know if you have anything for Ant, but I mean, that was quite tense at the end, wasn't it?
It was tense at the end. I do want to ask a question, though, Ant, and I probably think you're expecting this one. What was going on at the end there?
So there was a little bit of data that went wrong. There was a lap time called out of a 2:09, and that actually was an in-lap time. So there was a confusion around when it happened just about the time I pitted. So it was like, okay, it seems like the slicks may be working for somebody, because I don't think you're going to get there near that time on the wets. From what I'd learned from testing. However, I found out rather quickly that was the wrong call. I was hoping that they were going to warm up. I could see a dry line, but it was never happening. And I want to apologise to anybody I had contact with at the end there. It was not my intention. I should have pitted probably a lap earlier to get off of them. But at that point, my head was just like, I've just thrown this down the toilet. So,
good job. It's only a 4-car field, right? That would have been a very catastrophic and embarrassing way to lose a championship, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's one that I don't want to relive, but I think I've got away with it.
Yeah, you did get away with it, but in the end, it's the championship effort that matters, and you got yourself towards the top of the pile. So that deserves to be mentioned and celebrated. And I'll let you get back to the rest of your evening. Enjoy it.
Yeah, thanks, guys. I just want to say thanks to Pure Motorsport as well for the support over these last 5 weeks. Good stuff.
All right, fantastic stuff. As Ant Castle's their LMP3 Pro Championship winner, well, of course, despite the conditions and despite the call that was made at the end in error because of some dodgy data. We have a term for that in computing and IT, right? And programming. Garbage in, garbage out. If you have garbage data, you're going to make garbage decisions, Tara.
Yeah, but hey, I mean, if you're going to win the championship anyway, you might as well have some fun doing it, right? You don't want it to be too easy. I mean, he just didn't want to have that largest winning margin for the championship. He wanted to keep it close for us.
Yeah, potentially it might be the case. Anyway, We'll be very quick with some of our race winners here. So the first one we're going to drag in is going to be Dan Thomas. Dan, forgive me for making this very quick because we've been talking to a lot of people here today. Just sort of take me through a summary of your race and how you felt. Of course, it wasn't the championship for you today, but it was the race win. Does that sort of cushion the blow a little bit?
Yeah, I think coming into this season, you look at the schedule, and Silverstone was definitely one that I wanted to win. I guess coming after last year as well was a bit of an unfortunate scenario mid-race, so the win sort of got away. But yeah, what a race it was. Everything I had planned was sort of out of the window from the rain. I guess coming in, I either expected a fully dry or fully wet race, and none of which happened. And I guess the track got really greasy quite quick, so was quite surprised I could stay on the road. I guess sort of the plan was to underfuel the car so I could take an extra set of tyres later on. So it seemed to help with the light car and damp conditions. But yeah, I guess quite lucky to avoid the chaos at the start and the spinners through the race. But Ben's done a really good job this season. Like I guess he's won almost Spa with a lap to go, came from ninth to win at Road America, and left us all for dust last week, didn't he? So quite a well-deserved winner. But yeah, I guess cheers to Paul and Abruzzi for putting on the championship, and you guys for commentating as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just one more very quick one. If you can give me a relatively short answer, that would be amazing. Are you a wet weather driver?
Not at all. It's my first wet race, so it was a lot of fun.
Well, you still look pretty comfortable out there, but there we go. But Dan Thomas, again, enjoy the win, second place in the championship. Not too shabby for a couple of a season that is so short.
Yes.
So there we go. Dan Thomas, race winner in LMDh Pro, and Dara will be very quick with Aidan Carter.
Aidan, welcome in. Another race win for you. I mean, it was tense towards the end, of course. Sadly, in the end, no championship. But over the course of the year, 2 wins in the 5 races. I think you bookended the season with them. I mean, you must be pleased with that in a longer extended race.
Yeah, very pleased with that. Yeah, pleased with how it went. Was kind of glad that we finally got some rain this season. I think we were kind of expecting it a couple rounds and we never got it, so glad we got it at Silverstone. And yeah, it was really fun actually. It was a really enjoyable race. Didn't quite get the strategy right, but was able to find some grip on the wet tyres that played into my favour. So yeah, really enjoyed that one.
How difficult was it to keep the car under control? Because we saw so many people have at least little moments, but big spins, crashes into the wall. I mean, how tricky were the conditions out there?
Yeah, very tricky. I think to start with, especially, I think the second you get the wets on, you have to adjust very quickly. It's very difficult to find the right lines and find where the standing water is. But I think, especially with these kind of higher downforce cars like the LMDHs and the LMP3s, you kind of just have to drive around cautiously and let the pace build. The second you start pushing in the wet conditions, you're just going to fly off the road because you've got no ABS. So you have to be really gentle with it and really careful and find the drier patches. But once you've kind of got a route in your head of where the drier patches are, it tends to get a bit easier.
Yeah, but clearly you did that the best out of everybody in your class because you were the race winner. Forgive us for being short and sweet, but thank you for joining, Aidan, and all the best because you really have shown some great flashes this season.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for covering the season as well. It's been great to watch.
Thank you, Aidan. Connery, back to you. I think we've interviewed all of our champions and winners.
Yes, we absolutely have. And I just want to say in summary what a season it's been. It's been absolutely crazy. We had a very competitive race at Spa-Francorchamps to kick off the season, and then we're back here at Silverstone with another similarly interesting race, but for very, very different reasons. We had the first effect of the weather, the iRacing weather system here on this championship, and it couldn't have come at a much better time, at least for our entertainment. And I've certainly had a lot of fun here on these broadcasts. Obviously, I can only speak for myself, but I imagine, Dara, you're in a very similar spot.
Oh yeah, I mean, this has been a fantastic season. I have to thank, of course, Paul Crawford, head of esports at Motorsport UK, for doing such a great job in helping put on this series. And thanks to all the drivers, because we've had such fun, really, haven't we? 5 weeks of great racing action, so many great drivers, and so much great racing action all the way through this. I keep wanting to say all the way through the year, but it's only been 5 weeks.
Yeah, absolutely. I just want this to be longer. Like that would have been absolutely incredible. And I think there certainly is the talent in this field to make a pretty competitive, longer prototype season. But of course, that's up to the powers that be. But of course, we will have to be wrapping up here today. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, not only for this race, but if you joined for the previous races as well. This 2024 Abruzzi Prototype Challenge season has been excellent. Fantastic job to all of our championship winners: Ben Ford, Luke Monroe, Ant Castles, and Ethan Barford. Those guys will be very, very happy at the end of today, and I hope everyone at home is happy with the race that we just had. Thank you guys, everyone, for watching this RaceSpotTV production here on Motorsports UK as well, and we'll see you next time.